Good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome everybody to the January already meeting of the Laconia Zoning Board of Adjustments. With that, I'd like to set a few rules before we start tonight. Number one, please turn your cell phones to silent so that it will not disturb us during the meeting, please. Number two, during review of all the applications tonight, we will have a civil meeting, which means we will play nice with each other, and we ask all questions to the board, not to the audience, and any comments from the seats are not allowed. Each application has an opportunity to have a public speaking section where one individual will be invited to the microphone at a time to speak about the application they wish to speak for. Now, with that being said, if anybody is here for 111 Church Street, the applicant has requested to be moved to next meeting due to the fact that there is something in the family that's being taken care of. So if anybody's here for that, we will not be hearing it tonight. It'll be at the next meeting. The next thing is Mike, our alternate, will be here for the meeting for all applications so that we will have a full board for all applications. Okay? With that, we'll go ahead and get started with the roll call, please.
Suzanne Purley. Here. Roland Mayhew.
Here.
Michael Delvecchio.
Here.
Ori Gibbs is absent for notification. Michael Foot.
Here.
Stephen Booger.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. Let the record indicate that. Acceptance of the meeting for the previous meeting. Does anybody have?
Got to do December 10th and 17th.
On December 10th, we had our workshop meeting. Everybody get a chance to go over the minutes?
Yep.
Any changes, additions, corrections for those set of minutes? There being none, I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the December
Second.
10th meeting.
And we have a second. Roland? All those in favor? Aye. Minutes passed for the 10th. For the 17th, our ZBA meeting, everybody get a chance to review the minutes? If so, are there any additions, changes, corrections? There being none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I move we accept the minutes.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion, second. All those in favor? Okay, motion passes. Now, before we get into extensions, also, I have one more thing I meant to do in the housekeeping. There will be a time limit on this meeting. We have till 10 o'clock to get through this, any application. It is not opened up at 10 o'clock. Will not be heard tonight. It will automatically be moved to the next meeting, just to let everybody know. So, with that, we're going to start with extensions. We have Aqua Waterfront LLC variance extension request, 63 to 99 Fletcher Lane. We have actually 3 extension requests from them. The applicant, please come forward.
Good evening, Chris Tupri on behalf of the applicant. In the application, I've laid out our current status since I was here last. For our last extension, we're continuing to build the townhouses along Scenic Road and part of these parcels, and in October, the planning board extended our site plan approval for this site. Other than that, it's pretty much status quo as to what you've all heard before.
No changes or anything involved in any of the three extensions that are involved?
No, sir.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant? We'll take a motion on each application at a time. Like have any discussion of them? Okay. Do we have a date of when this extension's gonna
July
be good?
31st. He's asking till July 31st of 2019.
All right.
It's in the paperwork.
Very good. So we're gonna look at, first extension is 63-99.
I'll make a motion to approve the request for an extension for 6399 Fletcher Lane for the area variance through July 31st, 2019.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Motion passes 5-0.
I'll make a motion to approve application 6399 Fletcher Lane for a special exception extension to July 31st, 2019.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Passes 5-0. The last one is an extension request.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the extension request for a special exception for 664 Scenic Road. The extension will go through July 31st, 2019.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Okay, that one passes also. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, next is going to continue the public hearing. The purpose of the agenda, okay. This one is a continuation of application 2018-0027. Applicant requests a special exception from attachment 2 at table 1 to change the use of one building on the lot to a rooming house. Would the applicant please come forward? How are you tonight?
Hi, Bob. Good, how are you?
Great.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Pearson, and I represent Mr. Bedell, who is the applicant in this matter. As explained in the December meeting, Mr. Bedell is the owner of 1073 Union Ave, and he is requesting the issuance of a special exception to allow one of the two buildings on the lot to be converted from its former use into a rooming house having 6 rooms. At the December meeting, the board had continued this application pending receipt of emergency services call information from the Laconia Police Department for the purpose of determining whether the proposed use would create excessive demand for municipal fire, police, schools, or solid waste disposal. This data was received, and I would ask that it be entered by the board as evidence, and I would posit that it supports a finding that the proposed use will not create excessive demand for municipal police, fire, schools, or solid waste disposal services. If we look at the call data, the properties that are most analogous to Mr. Bedell's proposed use as the property that is listed at 16 and 22 Riverside Court. That has combined 6 units, and it had no calls for service on the property during the 3-year period for which data was presented. The other property that is analogous is 35 Messer Street, which also has 6 rooms and only had 4 calls. The property at 29 Messer has 9 units, which is 3 more than the proposed use, and that property only had 3 calls. I would suggest that this is evidence that the demand for services for a rooming house of the size that Mr. Bedell is proposing would not be excessive. During the board's December meeting, I had presented evidence to establish the applicant's compliance with all the requirements for a special exception. Namely, I presented evidence that the use is specifically authorized in the ordinance, that it won't create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety, that it will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer system, or have significant increase in storm water, which it will have none. The requested use will not create excessive demand for police, fire, schools, or solid waste disposal services. And again, the data from the Laconia Police also supports that. That all special provisions for use set forth in the ordinance are fulfilled. There are none other than the parking, and I had presented evidence showing that there is sufficient parking to meet the parking requirements under the zoning ordinance as well. The proposed location is appropriate for the requested use, and that the requested use is consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the master plan. I note that the City Council enacted the ordinance and established these factors as conditions that must be met for the, in order for the board to grant the special exception. And I'd also note that if all of those conditions are met, this board must grant a special exception under New Hampshire law. I would also note that none of the members of the public who spoke at that meeting presented any evidence that would tend to rebut the evidence that was presented by the applicant in connection with this. And I would also note that the two pieces of evidence, the letter and the petition-like letter that were submitted between the last meeting and this meeting also do not provide any evidence that would rebut our satisfaction of those conditions. If we look at the petition-like submission that was submitted by the residents of Clark Avenue and St. Catherine Street, that petition merely states that the signatories, quote, do not agree with the granting of a special exception. Whether they agree or not, if all of the conditions are met, under the law, this board has to grant the special exception. I understand where they're coming from, but this submission would really only be relevant to the City Council if they were considering whether to amend the zoning ordinance to prohibit boarding houses or to put additional conditions on those approvals. This submission does not state any facts that are relevant to the board in making its determination of whether a special exception should be granted, and I would ask that the board not consider this petition in its consideration of this particular application. The letter that was submitted by Mr. Dick Allen also doesn't state any facts that are relevant to the board's decision. Dick and Alice Allen are friends of mine, and I'm not going to question Dick's observations. However, I would note that his letter fails to rebut any of the evidence that's been presented already, including evidence that there is sufficient parking on the proposed site, which was one of his concerns. Based upon the evidence that is of record before the board, I would submit that Mr. Bedell's application meets the special exception criteria set forth by the council in the ordinance, and I would respectfully request that the special exception be granted.
Thank you. Any questions?
That's okay for me.
Absolutely.
I wasn't here last month, so forgive me. The main house has 3 rental units in it right now,
That's correct.
and how many people live in that house right now, per unit? About just
2, 4, 6 people.
6 people there now?
Help me to understand, please. In exhibiting this on this, speaking to the police department, the one property, you own 736,
Correct.
okay? Of that, you indicated that in the last meeting that you've brought it under control because there was a lot of problems with police calls and stuff to the property, and that over the 2 years you've had it, you've had a great improvement. And as I'm looking at the report, it's had 107 calls to that place, 736, just 736 alone, 107 calls.
In the last 3 years?
Yep, 2016, 17, and 18. And I'm just curious, to me, that sounds out of control, okay? If I based it on the other properties. On the other properties, I've had 23, total 56 on 23 Messer Street, which to me is still a lot at 56 going there. But as indicated on 35 Messer Street, 4, 6, 11, MacArthur Street, 38.
Mr. Chairman, if I would, the McGrath Street property is a group home that is run by the Lakes Region Mental Health Services for people with mental illness. I would posit that that is not a relevant comparative property.
Okay. So if we take that one out of the mix, then we're still left with one of your properties having a lot, would you say, of police calls?
Over 103 years?
Yeah, 107.
I would look at some of these, Mr. Chairman.
Well, the question it begs is, looking at some of them, a police car showed up, which means police presence have showed up, okay, 107 times to a boarding house, okay, of this same area under the same ownership, in which case we are being informed that the 6 units will not have a problem. I don't see how one under the same leadership is going to be different than the other. So please explain how one can be assessed differently than the other with, they're both under the same leadership with the same responses. How, and we say it's not going to be an increase in police calls. I don't understand that.
Well, they are both at different locations. This one has an occupancy of 10, the other one is going to be 6. And I would suggest that the board's consideration should not go to who the particular applicant is. This special exception is going to run with the property. What the relevant question is whether a boarding house that is of the size that is proposed in this application will cause an undue number of, or an excessive demand on police and fire.
So if I was to extrapolate that then, as indicated, let's take that down to, that's 10 people in the one unit that had 107. So each person possibility had 10 calls.
Each person had 2.43 calls per year.
Okay, so
And-
that
and
means
it-
I could extrapolate that over to the 6, where over that same period of time, I would expect 10 calls out of the same point, which would extrapolate out to about 60 calls.
Well, if you looked at 35 Messer Street, which is the exact same size,
You told me to take that one out
No, not
because
30.
it's a mental health.
no, 35 Messer Street, which is the one that has the 6 occupants. Their average call per year per occupant was .11. So, you know, looking at it, we have the exact same size property as is being considered.
So
by
what's the
board.
difference? There's got to be a difference because 10 people don't make that much of a difference than it does with 6. You're only adding 4 more people, and I can't see if the difference is 6 calls on a 6-unit boarding house or a 6-person boarding house, and you're trying to say that, but that one's under a different leadership. And under the current leadership of the one that has 107, with only 10 people, I just need to know how that's going to change with the same management ownership style that's going to make the 6 look any different.
our position is that the ownership does not matter and is not relevant to the consideration. It is simply what is being proposed for the use.
Okay.
We have a six-unit boarding house that is being proposed. We have other six-unit boarding houses that have not caused an undue or excessive amount of police and fire calls. Therefore, there is no evidence that would show that a rooming house of six rooms would cause an excessive number of those calls, and that the ownership is not relevant to the consideration of whether the proposed use meets this. And if we think about it, this special exception is going to run with the property. So regardless of whether Mr. Bedell owns this, or whether Mr. Bedell had somebody else come in here to get this special exception and then purchase the property, that special exception would continue to run.
Okay.
So that's why we don't feel that is relevant.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Do you have on-premises supervision in these properties that you,
Yes,
what's that?
yes, I do.
And it's not you, you live in Reading,
No,
Massachusetts.
it's not me. I live in Massachusetts.
And so you have you have paid people in each of these buildings.
Yes.
What's the average stay?
The average stay, I got some of them that have been there 8 years. 9 years. There's a core of about 4 or 5 who've been there for the majority. They've been there since I bought the building. And I know they were there multiple years prior to me buying it.
Are you talking about 736?
Yes. I haven't had 1073 long enough to make any judgments. I know the one lady that is managing that place for me, she's been there 2 years, I believe.
But you're talking about the three-family.
Yes.
Do you have a parcel of land which is really small, right? And you have a big apartment house on it, that already has 3 units in it. Now you want to add 6 more living units. It seems like the density is like, I don't know, it just seems like a lot to put on a small lot like that. And is it necessary? I don't know.
So, any other questions of the applicant at this time? There being none, you may have a seat for a second. There being none, I'd like to open it up to the public and ask if anybody from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. Please come forward at this time and introduce yourself for the record.
Good evening. My name is Stephen McGee, I'm actually his neighbor. It's my son, Stephen Anthony. We bought the building next door, and we spent some time renovating that building, and we're from Massachusetts as well. We moved up here a number of years ago. We believe Laconia is a beautiful place to build and establish a nice community, because I believe that there's a lot of value here. I have a concern about that building next door because we have long-term tenants. There's a barber shop right, the building that we own. I also bought a home in Laconia separately. The gentleman from Massachusetts mentioned that they have oversight. I don't see that. There's a lot of problems next door. I have a lot of concerns with the fact that it's a rooming house, and that there have been a lot of problems. It's in my opinion, it's drawing down on the value of Lakeport. I think Lakeport's a beautiful place in terms of value, in terms of potential return on investment. That's a problem next door. There's no oversight, not at all. I'd like to know who is watching that. The gentleman, what's that?
When we took over the building, we've had 3 different tenants leave because of the rooming house. We've had issues with people hanging around my driveway in the back. That was a huge part of it. Unfortunately, we have an easement where people have to use it. And there, I guess I actually had to, my building got shot, my my barber shop got shot with a BB gun today. And 2 days prior there, I guess, he's right over here. He told the police officer he was the person in charge. He's, there's two different, a level 2, level 3 sex offender that live there. He's one of them. He's convicted of felonious sexual assault on a child under the age of 12. I want him to stay out of my driveway. We got in an argument. After the argument, left, my window was shot with a BB gun. I, again, today, confronted him, the cops were called, there's a police report. I've seen, I found needles in my driveway, the windows come out, I burned spoons. The parking is horrendous. The list goes on. It's fighting nonstop. It's horrific living next to it. And running a business, I can't, there's only so much parking there as it is.
He runs the business,
And
the
people will
barber
park in front of my shop and just sit there all day long. It affects me horribly.
To have more rooming houses in Laconia,
I have a
caution.
9-year-old daughter. Each tenant has kids. All I ask is just stay out of my driveway. Just keep no one should have a sex offender welcome onto your property. That's not even, that doesn't live there. It's horrific.
The takeaway of this is not, I mean, that house is what it is. And I don't know if there can be any more oversight on that property. But to allow that man to have more rooming houses like us in Laconia is a shame. You're gonna bring down Laconia. There's no oversight. It's horrible. It's horrible. That's my.
For months, I had somebody who would
yeah,
reject
I
math
would-
and would dance in front of the shop. And I have customers that have to come in, and you have a guy taking his shirt off, spin, and we just sit there for hours just dancing. He's not there anymore. But, I mean, it's
I wanna retire here. I invested good money there. If you look at our property, it's well kept. My house that I bought I love Laconia, but that's atrocious. There's no oversight. Coming up from Massachusetts, I understand, trying to, good value here compared to Massachusetts. You can't buy anything down there for the value that he's buying. I get that. I moved up here though. I'm here. He's not. So the oversight, he's not gonna take care of it. He's gonna squeeze the buck. I get that. But it's gonna cost Laconia. It will cost us. That's my takeaway. I can only give you firsthand experience. I don't have any metrics to provide to you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak for or against this application, please come forward at this time and introduce yourself for the record.
Good evening. I am James Newell. I am the person in charge of the oversight at 736 Union Ave. And yes, I realize there's been an extreme number of calls for service at that location, but if you would have asked for them, those were me serving no trespass orders to, it used to be a flop house, a drug house. I've been there for 2 years and 6 months now. A little over a year ago, Mr. Bedell asked my help in cleaning it up the rest of the way it was supposed to be, the way he wanted in this town. And I asked him, is it an investment or a pump and dump? And he says it's an investment. And the man is, I've invited many people in, police, fire officials, and yes, I do have people there that deal with mental health issues. The one that he referred to, yes, is currently in receiving treatment, has been for a couple of months. I have some that are mobility impaired, and there is a spot directly in front of our house, in fact, both sides of that street, if anybody knows it up there, it's all 2-hour parking. There is no assigned parking for any building. Okay? There is a shared alleyway, and yes, there was incidents between myself and my next door neighbors the other night as well as this morning. And first I heard of his windows being shot out with this morning when he came over and confronted me, and I had to call a police officer. So the place is cleaned up, and if you ask any of the local officers, that the calls that they used to get, they were for overdoses, drug use. As far as needles and everything, no. There is nobody there that uses any needles or any crystal meth, heroin, anything. It's not allowed. There's no weapons on the property. They're not allowed. All I can say is that I've been in town 22 years. I started out right next door at 728 Union, and the place was terrible. 22 years later, I'm in it, and what I see is 1,000% improvement over the man who owned it from Massachusetts 22 years ago, along with a couple other buildings that are downtown that were very falling apart and dilapidated. Takes a lot of money to fix up an old building. We have to work with the neighbors as far as access way and be good neighbors. And yes, I used to have people go over to his house, but they were people that used to visit former tenants and didn't realize they had moved. So another rooming house in this town would be a tremendous boon. There's plenty of parking up there. There's really nobody else that wants it's too steep a hill to put a shop on or anything, but it's great for parking. Rooming house, yes. There's three, at 1073, there are 3 apartments, okay, with probably 3 vehicles altogether, maybe 4. The 6th room will only have parking for 6, of course. And in front of the one I'm in, we don't have parking. However, my tenants, anyone who has a vehicle, rents a parking space from Dick Allen. So parking really isn't an issue. It's always been that way at that spot on Union Ave. As far as that building, it's 100% cleanup, and I ask you not to judge it by what it was, but to speak to our chief of police, Matt Canfield, or Detective Woolley, or Detective Butler, or even Officer Howell that responded today, and you'll find out that most of the calls, yes, there's been a lot of ambulance pickups. I have some issues. They're in the hospital. But most of it is serving no trespass orders and getting the old out and keeping the new in. It's a fully secured building, brightly lit, and it's clean. It's a building that's almost 200 years old. It'll never be perfect, but Mr. Bedell has done a wonderful job with it so far. And I'd like to see everything continue and then see him given a chance to have another rooming house with much-needed housing at a reasonable rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for or against this application, please come forward and introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, good evening. I'm Pam Langlitz. I own the property directly across the street from Mr. Bedell's building, Trustworthy Hardware. I'm against the application. I've met Mr. Bedell. He's a customer of ours. He's a great guy. I don't feel a rooming house is, and I know this goes back to what his attorney said, that this is more about the exception than it is about people's feelings. He has a proposal with all the parking spaces. Chances are not everybody that lives in that building is gonna have a car, but if they do, he's got just enough parking for those people that live in the 6 rooms plus the apartments. I've already had people in my yard. I have a video of a guy parking in my yard the other night at 2 a.m. and staggering across the road to Mr. Bedell's building. I happen to know one of the girls that lives there. I text her, I said, I'm gonna have the car towed. It was in the way for plowing. When the car was parked there that night, there was no snow on the ground, so there was no reason why they couldn't have parked in Mr. Bedell's property. So I feel like this is gonna cause pedestrian traffic across the street. It's gonna cause undue duress for us to have cars in our yard for people that don't belong there. I'm gonna have to have them towed. I don't feel like it's a good use for the property. I feel like it's unsafe. Like I said, this guy parked in my yard at 2 a.m. and staggered across the street. I'm very disorganized. I'm not in favor of this as a use for that property. And I kind of have to disagree with him when he said that this is the only use of that property. Why couldn't you put in a couple of apartments in that building and maybe get some tenants in there that were more vested in the interests of the property as being a long-term person in that building, rather than, I feel like a rooming house, you're gonna have people kind of coming and going. They really don't care about the property. You're taking care of the place, that kind of thing. And I know they mentioned taking that property, one of the properties that was a mental health sort of halfway house, off the table, but the gentleman that just spoke ahead of me said that he has some mental health patients in his other buildings, so maybe that shouldn't be taken out of the mix.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak for or against this application? Please come forward and introduce yourself for the record.
You have to excuse me, I'm getting poked with the flu. My name is Helen Bovair. I own the property at 1057 Union Avenue in Laconia, which is 2 houses from the property in question. I feel that this is not a benefit to Laconia. I oppose the project. I have seen the activity that's been going on in that building. People don't respect the neighborhood that are there. I mean, his property that you keep talking about at 765 Union Avenue, have you ever driven by and seen all the people hanging around outside that building? I have. That building has not come up to any better standard than what it was in the past. I grew up here in Laconia. I was born in Laconia. I have roots in Laconia. I have been trying to make a better life for my family in Laconia. And stuff like this is what keeps bringing Laconia down. I own a property on Union Avenue, and if you go and do something like this and allow this man to do this to this property, it will diminish the value of my property. I have a 3-family rental, and I have good families that live there. And the rest of the neighborhood in the back, it's all good people. Single-family homes, 2-family homes, that kind of thing. And you put in a rooming house with people coming and going in all the time and party hee-haw all the time, bringing all the cops up there and making the different services for Laconia spend more of our tax dollars on that. What are going to happen to the property taxes for the rest of us? We could just share the property taxes for this person that doesn't even take care of the property he has. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name's Bruce LaBranche. I live at 38 St. Catherine Street. We're right behind the proposed project. I oppose it on a couple of reasons. You know, it's going to attract, you know, the same problems he's having on Messer Street. I bought in a single-family neighborhood. My wife, my children play outside. I really not looking forward to having a lot of police presence, drug use, and those kind of problems. Now, maybe he could do a good job in that, but I think a better use would be multifamily. I don't see jamming 12, 14 people in that small area and trying to call it a rental property. I just hope, you know, there's better use, and with all these problems that seem to be going along with the properties he owns, I just don't want to have any problems with my family, you know, with people that live there coming onto our property or partying late in the night. We've had a few instances. About a year ago, they were must have had a leak in the roof. There was guys out there yelling and swearing, putting a blue top on his building that he's proposing to make into the rooming house. The top has since blown off and nothing's got done, so we've had to look at a crappy roof because I look right at the back of the building. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Tyler. I'm a direct abutter, and if it wasn't for my fine neighbor inviting me, I wouldn't have known the meeting was going to take place this evening. I have nothing against Mr. Goodell and what he's intending to do. Rooming houses is a rooming house. However, I do have some serious concerns. One, there is a fence between our two properties. I'm quite confident I don't own it, but it is being plowed into my trees every year. It was being plowed into my trees before he owned the property, and I'm not really partial to the pines anyways, but it just looks kind of shabby, and I think that I would have a 10-foot fence put up if I had to have a rooming house there. And the reason why I say that is there is no fence ordinance in Laconia, and I'd be happy to put up a 10-foot fence to prevent the garbage from being thrown over the current fence. I realize there's only 6 people living there. One couple I've known for, I guess it's been about 6, 7 years. They've done a pretty good job staying on as tenants. She's always the one to take the garbage to the street, take the barrels back in, while everybody else throws it over the fence and into my property. I kindly pick it up and throw it back over the fence because I'm not going to spend the rest of my life cleaning up other people's garbage. Not that it had anything to do with Mr. Goodell or whatever, but it is kind of a local problem not necessarily local, it's systemic, I guess, with the heroin and the drug crisis. But we had an individual who apparently had been foraging for mushrooms to sell to local restaurants, and he sat in our gazebo and proceeded to shoot up heroin. And we had him on video, called the police came, told him he had to leave. And then the officers left, and he stayed there for another hour, playing with his apparatus, but there was nothing in sight. They couldn't arrest him. Nothing to do with Mr. Goodell, just another transient in life. I think if a rooming house is granted, I think a new fence should be erected at a 50-50 cost between the two of us. Because I certainly don't want to look at what's going on over there. He has made improvements. He put a roof on a major portion of the house, and he's been looking at doing more improvements with tarp, getting ready to do a rooming house. However, the tarp is disintegrating, and once again, I'm picking up disintegrating tarp. I don't own any oak trees, but I have oak trees to clean up after. They're not mine, they're not Mr. Goodell's. But I only have so much life, and I don't want to donate it to everyone else. I don't mind being a part of a solution, but I certainly can't spend my life cleaning up after others. Yeah. Although it's not really Mr. Goodell's problem, although he does own the problem, salt, sand is a necessary evil for all of us here in New England. I've had packages delivered to my property, and I've had to bring them over to tenants that live over there and almost break my neck because there is no treatment of the salt sand. The tenants fight to get in that driveway. It would cost little to nothing to put down some salt sand on occasion, and to not plow the fence into my trees. I'm not saying I'm for or against a rooming house. I do believe that there is a systemic problem with drugs and transient people in the community, and I don't think that adding another, I guess it's 6 more proposed units to this building would be an acceptable use. And finally, it has nothing to do with the proposed use, well, it has nothing to do with his direct proposed use, but if the city doesn't have a minimum square footage of living space per individual, perhaps we should consider it.
Thank you.
How we doing? Steve Smith, 44 St. Catherine. I'm the one that went around and got some signatures on a form. What could I say that hasn't already been said about this property? To bring a rooming house, another rooming house into the community, I can't see it. I'm gonna make this short because I'm gonna say the wrong thing, I know I am. So I'm opposed to it. I really am. And I think when they say they take the human factor, when I went around and got every one of these signatures from the neighborhood, and even from the commercial part of it, they truly did not want this in the community that they live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak for or against this application? Please come forward at this time to introduce yourself for the record. Let the record indicate no one else from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. Therefore, we'll bring it back to the board. Does the applicant have any further comments?
I understand, and I certainly sympathize with the people who have come out tonight to state their opposition. If this community does not want boarding houses. The proper venue for addressing that issue is the city council. As it currently stands, we have a zoning ordinance that allows boarding houses to be approved by special exception, and under a special exception, if all of the criteria are met, this board must approve a special exception. The evidence that I presented is out there. The speakers tonight did not present any facts that rebut the evidence that's already been presented to this board. And I would again state that we've met our burden of proving that we have satisfied each of those conditions, and this board, if that is the case, must approve the special exception.
Okay? Any final questions?
Would you consider making 3 apartments, small efficiency apartments, instead of 6 boarding houses? Because right now, everybody's leaning away from the boarding house.
Well, if that is in fact what ends up having to happen, if the special exception request is denied, then that would be something that we would certainly need to consider. But what is on the table right now, again, as I've already stated, I
Okay.
believe we've met the requirements.
Any other questions? There being none, I'd like to close it to the public. You may have a seat. Thank you very much. We'll bring it to the board for discussion.
You can't negate all these people.
Right.
There is a problem with boarding houses. Rob, is there a density issue? I mean, is there any guidelines with the city? How many people could be on a square acre of property?
There is for the number of apartments, there would be, but in this case, that does not apply to this.
Well,
I'm curious, how does it not apply?
They already have, the current use has 3 units for the permit, and they have that. So they're asking for a different use to have the mixed use on that lot. So they have, there's no density issue with that rooming house.
well, I don't quite understand that, because there's definitely, I think in that, 6 units per acre in that district, and we've got, a little tiny sliver of land?
That particular building has always been commercial use, so there's never been apartments in that.
Right.
It was a furniture store at one time.
I've seen a lot of commercial uses, and it's in a commercial district. But, I think the basic issue for me is the character of the neighborhood, and we've heard from the neighborhood, and it's a little bit hard to just say, I'm going to ignore everybody, when, one of the special exception criteria is clearly, is the proposed location appropriate for the requested use, and is it detrimental to the character of the neighborhood? I say yes. And that the proposed location is not appropriate.
So you're saying under G, the proposed location is not appropriate for the requested use?
Right.
Everybody seems.
And then, is the use consistent with the spirit, of the, is it detrimental to the use or out of character with the adjacent neighborhood? Yeah. General welfare of the public. It will create hazards to the health, safety, and general welfare of the public. And it would be detrimental to the use and out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. That's just my opinion.
Suzanne, could you pull your mic closer?
Mike, do you have anything to add to those?
Well, you
Couple of items? Do you feel that it would create safety, health, general welfare of the public, and detrimental to the use of or out of character of the adjacent neighborhood?
I have to echo Sue's thoughts on that, yes.
And do you feel that this type of use would increase the demand for municipal police?
Well, that's obvious with our report from Rob supplied.
I mean, we can't say yes or no, but it could.
It could.
Well, it's a density issue.
Yeah, it's a lot going on a very small lot.
Mike, you're being quiet.
You know, approaching this with an open mind here, and I really am thinking of this neighborhood, and you have to recognize what's behind it, the neighborhoods that are behind it. Some of these buildings are underutilized. I hear some of the stuff that we talk about is a necessity for affordable housing. Personally, it seems a little close for me. I wouldn't choose it as my own residence, but there may be people who are in need of this type of thing.
Do you feel that it is is detriment to the use or out of the character of the adjacent neighborhood?
In that it's so heavily commercial. On Union Ave itself, though there are a few places that are still holding residential, I think it adds to the density, and I don't know that it's horrible. This whole area down there where you look around Lakeport and on the other side of the light are a lot of these places that seem to attract this. And I don't know if it's just because of out-of-state developers, off-site people who are willing to grind it for every possible dollar they can without caring about the community, or when I read the newspaper, is there an actual need for this type of residence? And I'm having a time just deciding in my own head right there.
Well, it is already, and I agree with you, in the news and stuff, there has said that in Belknap County,
yeah,
there is a need for a workhouse force housing and this type of affordable housing in Belknap County. It doesn't necessarily specifically say Laconia needs this.
I think that Laconia has seen a lot of growth in affordable housing over the past several years, and I think we're maxed out on our affordable housing, so I don't think that's an issue.
So,
I think you have to look at the character of the neighborhood and be concerned about the people that do live there. And it is a mix of commercial and residential.
Roland, what do you think?
I have a relative who lives in the same type of facility in another part of Laconia. And I can attest that there is a need for this kind of facility in the city. I just question whether that particular one in that particular location is the place to be. But I do know that there is a need for that kind of facility in the city.
In Belknap County?
In Belknap County.
Okay.
But we're looking at this particular site, and you know.
So do you think this proposed location is appropriate for the use?
What's that?
Do you feel that the appropriate location is appropriate for the requested use?
Not for this.
Do you think it would be detrimental to the use of or out of the character for the adjacent neighborhood that
Yes.
surrounds this? Okay.
I have a question. What is the density for 3 apartments? How many parking spaces do you need? If we're going to talk about parking.
One
Is
and
it
a
going to be
half.
more or less? Is it going to be 1.5 per apartment?
Yes.
It's 1.5.
1.5.
Which is,
It's 4.5.
What, if it's 1.5 per room?
5 vices 6, so
Well,
it'd be
for
one
the
parking
apartments that are
space.
currently there,
Oh, what about the rooming house? Is it 1 per unit?
it's 1 per unit. 1.5 or 1?
One place for one unit, one spot for one unit.
So your difference would be 5 spaces versus 6 spaces.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. Anybody like to make a motion? I will if you don't want me, if you don't.
Okay, you can do it.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion of denial. A, the use request is specifically authorized in this chapter. It is, the requested use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. If they were to maintain pedestrian safety, could be the people who live there as they cross the street, as indicated by some of the commercial businesses there, that they are parking in their parking lot because they can't get up, I presume, get up their other, but the requested use will not overload any public water, drainage, or sewer system of any municipal system, nor will there be any significant increase in stormwater runoff onto the adjacent properties of the street. The requested use will not create excessive demand. Let me start that one again. The requested use will create excessive demand for municipal police for this type of use, fire protection, school, solid waste, particularly in the police section of that. Any special provision for the use as set forth in this chapter are fulfilled. The requested use will not create hazard to the health, safety. Let me start that one again. The requested use will create hazard to the safety, health, and general welfare of the public, nor be detrimental to the use, as it is detrimental to the use of and are out of character of the adjacent neighborhood, which it is out of character. The proposed location is inappropriate for the requested use. So it's not appropriate for the requested use, and the requested use is not inconsistent with the spirit and intent of this chapter and the master plan. So we got a motion?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Discussion of the motion. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, the motion is of denial is approved, and there you have it. Okay, we're going to move on to public hearings. The next application, we'll give a minute for everybody to
In the interest of full knowledge, I have to tell the board that at one time I owned that building.
That's an issue.
That's not an issue. One time, most of everybody owned something.
That's true.
That's
a long
lived here
time
long
ago.
enough, so, but thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. The next application is part of our public hearing and possible consideration and vote. The purpose of this agenda section is for the board to have a presentation for the applicant and open a public hearing for the public to provide input. The board may also deliberate the application, decide, and conduct a final vote at this time. All right, the first application is 0030 SE 658 Union Ave, special exception. The applicant is requesting a special exception from Article 5, Section 23526, and Attachment 2.3, Table 1, to create a boarding, rooming, lodging house. Would the applicant please come forward, introduce yourself for the record, and tell us how we might help?
Chairman, zoning board members, for the record, Steve Smith and Associates. I'm here tonight representing the Laconia Area Community Land Trust. We're here to talk about a parcel of land at 658 Union Avenue. This piece is located between the Rome Joe's facility and Belknap Tire, side of the road. There's currently the office space for Laconia Area Community Land Trust. They are looking at relocating their office down on Port Street, and we're here tonight requesting a special exception to convert that particular facility into a lodging facility. We're proposing to convert it into a 5-bedroom lodging facility. I submitted plans on the facility itself, the interior improvements that we're proposing to make in this building. We are going to be adding a small porch on the side and to the rear for handicap access, and a lift in the back for handicap access. We have 10 parking spaces out back. The parking is in the rear of the facility itself. The boarding house will be managed in partnership with Horizon Counseling Center and Navigating Recovery. The building will have a common kitchen, dining, living area with the 5 bedrooms, a management office on site. There'll be new fire alarm employed in the building, a sprinkler system, which is not in there at this moment in time, to bring this building up to code, fire safety wise. The property was originally residential. I think it was prior to the Laconia Area Housing going in there. It used to be a law office for Brad Kidder. And prior to that, it was residential itself. There will not be any major outside changes other than that new porch on the side and the handicap access in the rear. There is a handicap ramp between the existing building and the Belknap tire, which would be removed for this new handicap access into the building. I believe you have a letter from the police department relative to what we're proposing. This is going to be a managed facility. Carmen is here from the land trust, and there is someone here, I don't know the lady's name, can't remember.
Daisy Pierce.
From Horizon. We believe that it meets all the standards for a special exception. I did meet with the planning department, had a meeting with them prior to even coming and filing this application to discuss what we're doing, how it fit into the property, how it met the codes and standards and the regulations prior to filing our application to this board. With that, I'll turn it back to you and answer any questions that you might have.
I'd like to get a little more information on who's going in this building and what's going to be
I'm
happening.
going to let these guys talk a little bit about that.
Hi, my name's Carmen Lorenz. I'm Executive Director of Lakes Region Community Developers, which is the DBA for Laconia Area Community Land Trust. We are in our planning, and this is Daisy Pierce, who's the Executive Director of Navigating Recovery of the Lakes Region. Our goal is to provide this as a supportive environment for women who are in recovery. So it could house up to 8 women. There would be 3 double bedrooms, 2 single bedrooms. 1 on the first floor would be fully accessible. Horizons Counseling Center, which is based out of Guilford, and Navigating Recovery of the Lakes Region, which is based here in Laconia, would basically operate the house. We would own the house, they would operate the house, work with the residents who are living there to establish and implement their recovery wellness plans. Horizons has been providing substance use disorder counseling for people in the Lakes region for over 30 years. And both organizations have outstanding reputations in the community for the services that they provide. They would be on site in the building several hours every day. There would be weekly house meetings with all the residents and the service providers to discuss house rules, anything that's going on. So it would be a supervised environment. And there really isn't, and Daisy maybe can speak to this a little bit more, but this type of housing option for women in particular is very lacking in our community. Right now there are some beds for women in this type of group living environment, but they're not as, they're not as structured, and they're also not as flexible in terms of the types of treatment and the types of recovery supports that the women can be engaged in. So
Is this similar to all the facilities that Randy Bartlett, I can't remember the name of his business, but what Randy runs on Messer Street? Is this comparable? Because he does it for men. Is this
the one, the Riverbank House?
Riverbank House?
On Church
Yeah.
Street?
Yeah, which is all men?
Yes, to a certain extent, it would be comparable, except for Horizons Counseling and Navigating Recovery are both service providers that do services in the community as well as at the residence. And Randy Bartlett's residence is just for the men who live there. And we actually provide services at the hospital, at the jail, and to community members.
So you actually have professional people
We do.
who are and licensed to do this type
Yes.
of work?
So the professionals from Horizons Counseling are licensed alcohol and drug counselors, LADACs, and the professionals from Navigating Recovery are certified recovery support workers, and both of those types of individuals have received their licenses from the state of New Hampshire.
These women that are going to be occupying that house, have they been people who are incarcerated in Concord, or are they people who have been in drug rehabilitation programs?
So a requirement to reside in this home will be that they have completed a treatment program prior to being allowed to move into this home. So either a 28-day residential treatment program or the CORE program at Belknap County, which is Correctional Opportunity for Recovery and Education, or something similar to that. It can't just have been incarceration to non-incarcerated. They have to have completed a treatment program while they were incarcerated.
And you're monitoring them, and if they fall out, they're like removed from the building?
Yeah, so they will, they'll have to go urinalysis screenings on a regular basis. And so substance use, if they test positive, it won't be immediate grounds for dismissal because we don't want to kick them out for presenting symptoms of the disease that they're there for us to support them. But we will have to refer them to a higher level of treatment, which means sending them back probably to a residential treatment program.
Will there be 24-hour, 7-day a week supervision?
Yes.
On premises, so.
Well, I mean, so we won't be there 24 hours a day, but we will check in with them 7 days a week for, on a daily basis. They will have to check in with somebody. Yeah.
Will the,
On premises,
any other sex be able to,
No, all visitors have to be approved by the certified recovery support worker who will be on site there.
any overnight visitors?
Don't believe, no, we're not
No.
allowing any overnight guests.
And also no children. So it'll just be the women who are.
Single women.
What,
in recovery.
Daisy, what's the proposed length of stay?
So they can stay for up to 2 years.
Oh, really?
One of their requirements is that, they have to complete intensive outpatient programming while they're in this house, and they have to become employable. So our two goals for them are to continue their treatment and to get them a job, so that within 2 years, they're in a position where they can then afford their own apartment or housing.
How are the meals provided?
Communal kitchen, they'll be cooking their own meals.
I'm sorry?
Communal kitchen, they'll be cooking their own meals.
You have a chef there, or?
No,
No,
the
they
women
cook
will have to
their
cook. Yeah.
Well,
We provide
They
great
provide their own
services, but
meals?
no chefs. Yeah, they will have to cook for themselves, yep.
So where does the food come from?
They'll
That they
buy,
cook?
purchase
Grocery
their own
shopping,
groceries,
yeah.
yeah.
Fair question.
Yep, yeah. No, it's not
Nowadays.
it's not a full-service facility. It's a house that they will live in, and they will share the responsibility for doing
House
chores
chores.
and cleaning and cooking and all of that, so.
Do they pay rent?
So we have worked out a plan where we'll have a rent reserve fund, because some of the women, when they first move in, may not have the ability to pay rent. So each person, when they move in, will have their own plan, essentially their own recovery wellness plan that includes, how are they going to get a job if they don't have a job? How will they get to the point when they can start paying rent? And the rent will be essentially based on their income and will be increased up to the regular rent level over time. So it's based on their individual circumstances and their own recovery wellness plan.
Is the job a requirement? They have to eventually have a job?
That's the goal for everybody, yes.
I think the one exception would be if they had disability that, prevented them from being employable. But, I mean, that's the only exception, yeah.
How long does it usually take for someone to go through the program, or what is their usual stay as they grow and flourish?
Everybody's recovery journey looks quite different, and since this would be the first house of its kind that these two
Yeah.
organizations would be running, I don't have a typical stay.
But like we said, I mean, the parameters are they can stay for up to 24 months. But I think, as Daisy said, it will be very different for every person because they'll be in
Work through their
different-
recovery
Yeah.
wellness plans at different paces.
What city services do you think will be required to accommodate this facility?
City services?
Yes.
Just the regular, I mean,
Yeah.
we have water and sewer, garbage pickup. That's really
Yeah.
it.
Police, fire.
Transportation will be,
From our welfare department or anything like that would not be
Well, because
required
they're
of
not-
any of the,
Right.
of those types of services?
Well, we won't, when the women are there, because we have the ability to phase in their rent, they shouldn't have to be coming to welfare asking for rental assistance or anything of that nature. We'll be able to work with them to get them up to the rent level that they can afford based on whatever job they end up getting.
So how long do you anticipate or hope that this works? Because in granting a boarding house and stuff like that, we also have to look at the next owner.
Yes, so.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. The funding that we will be using because we are going to do a full renovation of the house, would come from New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. It comes from the state's Affordable Housing Fund. And that carries with it a requirement to maintain the housing for a period of 30 years. So that essentially, if we get that funding and we sign that contract, that's what will be held to, is a 30-year affordability period.
Will
And
that
you
building be taken off
anticipate-
the tax? Will that building be taken off the tax rolls?
No, we currently pay taxes on it already, and
I know.
we will continue to.
But you're not going to request the city
No.
remove?
No.
I've asked you this on other occasions over the years.
And do y'all have any mutual contract, or is it a handshake with the two organizations that make this house possible?
There's actually 3, but Jackie Abakoff, who runs Horizon Counseling Center, has the flu, so she couldn't be here tonight.
Right.
She apologizes. Yes, we're currently working on that. We're not sure if we're going to have an actual lease or more of an MOU, but we will have a signed document that clearly delineates the roles and responsibilities of each of the 3 organizations.
Because as the current use to me is very admirable, I'm kind of concerned as if this ends in 2 years, what happens with the property that now has a boarding house?
Right, I think, based on Horizons having a 30-year history of providing this service in the community, and the fact that they and all of the organizations that are working together to combat the substance use disorder crisis that we currently find ourselves in, this is something that all of those organizations, it's more than just the 3 of us, have come together and have identified this type of housing, especially for females, as really being needed in the community. So I really don't think that it would be great if we
2 years. we
solved
didn't
the
have this problem.
problem in 2 years and we didn't have to provide. I'm sure we could find something else to do with the house that fit into, sort of affordable housing for people that work and live here.
But in all fairness, I don't see this issue going away in 2 years.
unfortunately.
So if we were to condition the approval based on it remaining a women's recovery type facility,
Can we do that?
then without the change coming back to, if there was a change, it would come back to the board for review.
I think
That-
that almost sounds fair, but wouldn't you be considered, in a sense, a healthcare facility?
No, it's not a licensed facility where, so for example, the women who live there, they'll be a lot of them will still be participating in intensive outpatient treatment, but they'll go to Horizons Counseling Center in Guilford for that service. I think the recovery coaches are very flexible in terms of where you might meet with individuals, but it's not a place where that type of medical care would be provided on site. They would go to whoever their treatment provider is to receive the services. So it really is just where they live.
So would you characterize this, though, as a treatment and recovery facility? I mean, we're just trying to work through how we can, this is, I think it's great project, and I think it is needed when you see how much we've got going for men downtown. But I'm going, we're having so many issues right now with rooming houses. And this is a different situation. It's more of a managed facility, and it's under the control of, 3 organizations. So I think there's a lot to be
That's
said
right.
for it,
Right, and I agree with you there to the point of as long as it remains in that type of situation. Me playing on the cautious side of reality, I'd like to have that, if that particular use change, then we should have the ability to review that change.
Right.
But as long as it stays the way it is,
Okay,
then,
I'm getting a
you know,
nod.
that's,
I'm
that's,
100%.
So, any other questions at the moment? There being none, I'd like to open it up to the public. Please have a seat for a second. I'd like to open it up to the public and ask if anybody from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. Please come forward and introduce yourself for the record. Let the record indicate no one from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. Bring it back to the board and ask, are there any any further questions?
No, I think we're all set, thank you.
Okay, no closing comments? With that, I'm going to close it to the public, bring it to the board for discussion.
I'm good with the condition that you propose.
There's a
just-
big need.
Yeah.
I'm well aware of, and the plan looks great. I think it'll be an improvement to the building and not a detriment to the area.
No, under the current use, with the current plan. I have to agree with you, but I would still like to add that condition,
That remains,
if it's approved, that it remains this way, and if it, and that particular women's use for rehabilitation and whatnot changes and no longer ceases to be that function, that it should be coming back to the board to be reviewed.
Okay.
So, any other discussion? There being none, I'd like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve application for 658 Union Ave, Laconia Area Community Land Trust, to operate a managed care type facility, 5-bedroom lodging facility on the site. The use is specifically authorized in this chapter. This type of lodging is allowed in the commercial zone by special exception. The requested use will not create undue traffic congestion. There is sufficient parking on the site already, and I don't see any issues with traffic congestion or pedestrian safety. The requested use will not overload any public water, drainage, or sewer system or any other municipal system. The building has sufficient parking exist on the site. The only minor change to the building will be addition of a handicap access to the building, which will be required. The requested use will not create excessive demand for municipal police, fire protection, schools, or solid waste. This is going to be a managed facility with constant management, looking and over what's going on in the building, and with an on-site office inside the building. There are no special provisions set forth in the chapter. The requested use will not create hazards to the health, safety, and general welfare of the public or be detrimental to the use out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. The neighborhood exists as a mixed-use, commercial and residential area right now. The proposed location is appropriate for the requested use. This, again, the original use of the site was residential, and this is, continues as a residential use to on-site without any site adjustments. It's just improvement to the building. And the use is consistent with the intent in chapter of the zoning ordinance and the master plan. The use is allowed by special exception within the zone, and we will be approving this with condition.
The condition would be if it changes from the particular use as a women's rehabilitation, and help me with that word to make sure I don't miss. Recovery, rehabilitation and recovery, that it should be, come back to the board for approval for a change of that use. Okay.
Second.
Is that clear on that condition?
Yep, we got it.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. Discussion of the motion. There being none, all those in favor of the motion? It passes. Thank you very much. Okay. Next on the agenda is actually two items. We can hear them together if the board wishes. They're pertaining to the same property. The first one is a variance for 16 Layton Ave. Applicant is requesting a variance from Article 7, Section 23541, and Attachment 3, Table 2, to create a detached accessory dwelling unit. The second one is application 32 SE, which is special exception, 16 Layton Ave, special exception. Applicant is requesting a special exception from Article 7, Section 235-41, and Attachment 2 to create an accessory dwelling. Wait a minute, am I hitting
Yeah,
myself?
what do you got going on there?
I
No,
don't
one is to
know.
create the accessory dwelling, and one is because it's an undersized lot, so they need a variance because it's an undersized lot. And then they need the special exception for the accessory dwelling unit. Got that right?
Correct.
Two different things. One is the undersized lot, and one is the use itself.
Okay, would the applicant please come forward, introduce yourself for the record, and
Hello,
tell us
board.
how we can help you.
Oh, good, thank you. My name's Andrew Ray. I'm a resident of 16 Layton Avenue. This is Art Abelman. He's assisting me with a lot of the process of all this involved since I've been in Laconia about 2.5 years now. So we own the property on 16 Layton. It already contains a very old dwelling in which we live in currently from pre-1950s. Very inefficient. And then we have a very nice garage that was built by the prior owners with an undeveloped upstairs, approximately 1,200 feet. What we're seeking to do is turn the upstairs of that garage into about a 650 square foot living space for two reasons, and really two reasons alone. Number one is so that my family and I can live in there while we renovate the older, very inefficient main building that we live in currently into something that's more fuel efficient, is in compliance with current building recommendations and match the community that we're in, which currently our dwelling is vastly below surrounding properties. And then the second is my in-laws are reaching retirement age, live out of state. We aim to help support them as you know, as time comes along. Would like a place that we can easily have access and help support them as they get older. both my wife and I are physicians. We have no need for rental or use of this space beyond family and nature. So the dwelling is in place already, and that's what we're coming here today to gain approval for.
Were y'all here before in the last 2 months?
No.
Not at all,
No.
no.
That was a different
Were you
application.
here for a different application?
A while back for Dennis Avenue.
Yeah. I thought I recognized you. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, that was a different kind of situation.
Good evening. So, as you've indicated, you had no use for the unit after you finished the house. What are your plans with the unit at that point?
No, he just said.
In-law.
I missed it, didn't I
In-law,
get-
that he's.
In-law?
Right now, my in-laws live in Michigan. My mother-in-law comes out almost every month to visit grandkid and my wife.
Not you.
You know, I'm just a side bonus. And then eventually, once they do reach retirement, we'd like them to be able to come and stay in for a prolonged time without having to stay off-site.
Okay. I missed that. I apologize.
I always ask this question when this comes up. The apartment that you want to create is upstairs in the garage.
Correct, yes.
And your in-laws are going to be eventually living there.
I doubt it will be full-time, but it would definitely be a
question.
I'm sorry, okay.
My question is, how are they going to get up and downstairs?
Very good question. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. They have little elevators that can go up and down the side. We have a nice, yeah.
But then the kids can carry them.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a concern. The drawing you gave us for the accessory dwelling unit is 1,150 square feet.
Yes, so there'll be 650 that's sectioned off as the living dwelling, and the other will be unfinished storage units.
That's not what you presented to us. You
The
presented.
drawing does have a mistake on it, I apologize.
Well, we need a correct drawing.
I'd be happy to provide that. In fact, you can just cross out where the bathroom is. The bathroom will be on the other side of the
We
wall.
need a correct
We can
drawing.
provide that.
I know, but
Yep.
we need it before we can approve, I
We
think.
can make it contingent.
We can do that.
Which one was that?
We'd be happy
Because
to.
we can
That
say-
was our
Contingent
fault.
upon a drawing.
Is that with the
Yeah.
variance or the
Continue,
special
and then they
exception?
can tell us.
I mean, I have no problem with what you're doing. It's totally
Yeah.
legal, it's totally acceptable. There's an accessory dwelling unit law, and, you know, you can do it, but you're limited to 750 square feet.
That's correct, and we can address that.
And
Sure,
you
sure,
need
the-
to address that and make sure that whatever building permit is issued, because other than that, it becomes an apartment and you just have to pay taxes on an apartment.
Yeah, we have no problems if we have to come back and represent to the board. I have no issue with that. We are not trying to go around or create something untoward in this event.
We can discuss that point, maybe.
The
Because
simplification.
they'll have to get a permit. We can have them, we can say they can build up to that, whatever you say.
Yeah,
And,
I'd like to approve a specific plan, you know.
okay.
But I don't know, what do you guys think? You know, I mean, we could be lenient.
Oh, I understand, you know, that too.
If it makes you feel better, if the contingency would be happy to provide a plan, or if we need to come back, fine, but we can give you a
Are you
redeveloped
under a
drawing.
time frame here that you need to?
The timeframe is such that the desire is to get the building process completed and started in construction phase, so that by the time the summer comes, one, it can be utilized by in-laws, but also it can ease and facilitate the time process when the house renovation can get done.
Would a 1-month delay put you terribly out of?
No, it'll clog up, we don't want to clog up the board, but we can come back, that's no problem. It's just if you make it contingent upon whatever 750 square foot of space,
That's what's allowed, and I'd feel better if we saw what you were really gonna, and approved what you were really gonna do.
I mean, you've got the photographs.
No?
Well, I
I'm
have the
fine.
photographs of the building, but you gave us a plan that says you're building an 1,150 square foot unit.
That was a mistake. I apologize.
I have a question. So I'm assuming this is going to be above this garage here?
Correct, yes.
Right, and what's this other section? Is that going to be an upstairs, downstairs part of?
I'm sorry, I don't know the picture that you're referring
This,
to. I
this
apologize.
shows the garage with the 2 doors on it.
The workshop.
Right, workshop as it
I
is.
think my glasses work better than
Yeah,
mine do.
and I'm just wondering what this whole setup is over here.
This is
This
the workshop.
is that going to be part of the,
No, it's gonna be a finished workshop. There's nothing down there besides my tools.
and so all of the,
The entire space up here is what's on the plan.
all right.
And the other question I had is, it refers several times that there's no municipal water or sewer down there?
No.
So everything is off a well and a septic system?
Well and a septic system.
Is that common down on Layton Ave?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, everyone, there's no city sewer or water down there.
It doesn't come past Eastman Shore.
You're gonna probably need better drawings for the planning, for the building permit anyway,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
We're still working on finalizing the contractor for the job, but we're working just to get the approval for the variance and the exception.
So will a like drawing like this correctly?
To scale, yeah.
Okay.
But
And
unless, you know, that's
Can-
just my feeling.
Just
Tell
a
us what makes you happy.
Absolutely, just a request if maybe just add the contingent, and we'd be happy to submit the new drawing and plan instead of coming back to the board, but if you need us to come back, that's not a problem, other than inconvenience and call
I
schedule.
think it seems the comfort level would be to come back with the correct drawing.
We'll
so
put you
we
first
can
on the
review it.
agenda next month, so
And
you would be in and out of
first
here.
and
Okay,
in and
that-
out.
That would be good.
So what we end up doing, we don't stop here. We're gonna continue trying to discuss to make sure there's no other issues involved. And that way, we can address just what's there unless the drawing itself brings up other questions. you
That
know.
apply for both the
That-
variance and the exceptional use?
I'm sorry?
That applies for both the variance and the exceptional use?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
I don't see, personally, I don't see an issue with either of them. I just want to make sure we're approving the right.
Correctly. Yep.
I mean, it's just so, we've approved several of them down in your area on Layton Ave, so, I mean, recently. So, you know,
Yeah,
it's
no,
just something that's happening and we do have an ADU law and, you know, it has a purpose.
Yep.
And you fit within it, but and I think that, you know, the lot is a little, how small is the lot? But I still think that there's, given the property itself, there's plenty of room there, and the building already exists.
Exactly.
So you're not encroaching more onto the lot,
No.
you know?
And
So
even
to
when we
me-
remodel the current dwelling that we reside in, we are not changing the footprint at all. We're just making it a better and more efficient
Right,
building after
right,
that.
which makes total sense. So, go ahead.
When was this building built?
I believe 2008. Oh, okay. 05 to 08.
But, I mean, so it's been through its approval to be
Yeah,
built, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
That was all done by the previous owner.
Yeah.
so there, you know, like you said, there are two ways to go. We can either approve it contingent upon him getting the thing, or just have him come back.
I have
Sounds
one
like
more
we should
question.
review to make sure the drawings are correct to what we are approving, and
If he can be first on the agenda, and
He
he's
can
not
be
opposed to it.
first.
That's what-
any other questions at the moment?
I do.
Yes.
What is your septic design for right now?
Currently, we have a design septic plan for a two-bedroom home, which we reside in currently.
Yeah.
We're under agreement, and there was previously a planned four-bedroom septic designed by Able when we bought the property that had expired. Ames, when we bought the property that's expired, we were going back through and resubmitting that to the state, same plan, same septic system that was already approved.
And you'll have all your setbacks and everything like that, everything will be,
Yeah, yeah, the plan has both buildings in it currently.
Yeah.
And we're not changing the buildings, we're adding it'll be 4 bedrooms total between the finished room on top of the garage and 3 bedrooms in the main house.
That was all done, the previous owner had designed it, and had it
No, I
designed,
understand.
engineered, so we're just picking up where they left off.
According to the city, that building was built up in 1927.
Oh, really?
Front-
Yeah, we've gotten everything from
I'm sure it's right.
1900 to 1940, so yeah, that would make sense.
It would have been one of the first ones out. on
It's really
Lake.
nicely balanced on some granite blocks down there, so.
I get this from the city when we were doing it.
It's
Yeah, you run the property card on Vision Appraisal.
Yeah.
You can get it right on the city's website, yeah.
yep.
Okay, I think that's what
Okay.
we're gonna do. We're gonna make a motion to continue this to the next meeting. I'll make a motion to continue to the next meeting, to allow the applicant to provide, accurate drawings, square
And
footage.
that's for application 31. There's 2 applications. We got to continue.
Okay, I'll continue them both. Can we do
Yes.
them both at the same time?
Rob, can I consult with you on the
No.
detail of those drawings? Thank you.
No, we have to vote separate.
Okay, I'll make a motion to continue, where's my agenda? Make a motion to continue the variance application for 16 Layton Ave to the February, whatever that's going to be, February 19th meeting, to allow them, well, that one, we're actually, the area variance, we're just going to continue them both, so, okay,
Right.
that's my first motion, to continue that one to the February 19th meeting.
I just don't want to come back and then have you ask for more additional information on the exceptional use. So that's why I asked if they're both.
I think we're good,
Okay, thank you.
and Rob will work with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a motion.
So that they can bring back a new.
Well,
drawing.
that's the next one.
Okay.
That's the special exception.
So, yeah, I second the motion. Any discussion? All those in favor of continuing to the next meeting? Application number 31.
Okay, and I'll make a motion to continue the request for a special exception. Wait a minute, I did this wrong. The special exception was first, right?
Nope, special exception was second.
Now, on the agenda,
It's second. The variance is first and the SC is second.
8, 2, and 3.
okay, that's, I did it right. What am I doing?
On the agenda, the special exception was
I'm
first.
looking, I was looking at the next one down. Okay, I make a motion to continue the special exception application for 16 Layton Ave in order for the applicant to provide accurate drawings.
Very good. Thanks, we'll see you next month.
Thank you, folks. Have a very good
I
evening.
second.
Okay?
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, folks.
I'll see you later, Rob, thank you.
And please put those, well, that's the only one we're continuing, so that would be first on the agenda anyway, so. But just in case that would be, something else gets continued, that would be first of the continued.
Chronologically, they're first.
Right, thank you.
We appreciate that.
Thanks. Okay, good night.
Okay. Next is application 0033, a variance at 145 Union Avenue. Applicant requesting a variance from the attachment 3, table 2, for density to allow for 6 units on a lot where currently only 4 units would be allowed. Would the applicant please come forward, introduce yourself for the record?
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Mark Daniels. I'm a recent addition to the Laconia community, if not in person, then I suppose in spirit. I recently bought 2 properties on Union Ave, about 500 feet that way. And I would like to take the 2,500 square feet of attic space in one of the properties and convert it into 2 new residential units. The city code specifies the density maximum of 20 units per acre. For each of the 2 properties, that would be a hair more than 4 units each. One of the properties has 4, the adjacent one has 2. I would like to turn the 4 unit into a 6 unit, as was just referenced. And in the application, I've attached the details behind the reasoning for this. The parking at the property definitely supports the additional parking spaces. The ratio of 1.5 would lead to 12 spots. There is room for 13 or 14 on the lot. In addition to that, I feel that it's in line with the spirit and the letter of the ordinance, and that it would increase the value of adjacent properties with beautiful units overlooking the reservoir and lake.
I'm confused about this. Hey, Rob,
Yes.
what's
I
highlighted
was
in
up there
yellow?
I was up there
Which-
on Saturday,
Mhm.
and
Is it, which property
there
are
was
we
a whole
talking
line of
about
cars
here?
in there.
He's
There was
talking
only
about
one
the
spot
property in
that
the
was
center.
open.
The one
So
right, yes.
I
Well,
recently.
why is yellow highlighted?
That's just highlighted for, however.
But that's not, because I kept looking at this saying, I don't get
No,
it.
that's not the property, that
Yeah.
just happened to be the property that was highlighted when that was printed.
The properties are the 2 directly north of there. The yellow property is not.
So you're talking about,
What lot number is
You
it?
have to go up
The-
High Street and go to the back.
59 and 58, so immediately the left of 12 and between 9 and 10.
Okay.
So,
the map.
wait a minute, so is it this building?
It's that building, and I own
And this
the
one?
one immediately adjacent.
Is it
The
this one?
renovation would be on the larger building in between the two. The
So-
parking lot is
So these are
shared.
the two buildings?
It is two separate buildings,
Right,
correct?
okay, but that's, okay, because I was just
You're asking
So
for
we're-
apartments in the big building though, right?
So we're.
Correct, yes.
No, I don't want to say big building, I want to say lot numbers, please.
59.
So we're talking about 59.
Lot 59, correct, which is
All
145.
right, so the
147.
building on lot 59 is the one you want to increase the density on.
That's correct.
And that's 145?
That's 145-147.
Lot 58 has nothing to do with this whatsoever.
That's
Less-
correct.
But you own that lot too?
I do own that lot as well.
And
the
how many
parking-
units are in there?
2 units are in that property, and the parking lot is shared between the two.
Well, we can't look at it as shared, because if you sell one of the properties, then it's not shared anymore. So from the viewpoint of this, we won't discuss 58, and we're not going to discuss 60. We're going to discuss lot number 59.
Understood. And
Okay.
to that point, the parking spots that are outlined here show, I believe, more than the required ratio even for that one. If anything, that is the larger, the larger fraction of the parking lot is included on that property's.
And as I said earlier, I was up there, and there was only one open space in
That's,
that entire parking lot.
that's correct. So this is, as I mentioned, I acquired the property last month. When I went to the property, I noticed that 3 or 4 vehicles were not registered with the property. So I've had a property manager be in communication with the tenants about making sure that that was available. In addition, the garage at the back is currently not occupied. It was used as storage by the previous owner, so
Where's
that
the
would be.
garage?
It's right underneath number 13, but that would be,
Are you counting the garage as a parking spot?
The garage is on a separate lot though, right?
correct.
Parking
but-
spot, let me clarify something real quick here. Parking space 11, 12, and 13, depending on if that property line is what I see, transecting space 11,
Yep,
is that a property line?
yep.
That's correct.
Okay, so if that's the property line going back, now which line does that property line go to? Does it go to the beginning corner of 8 or to the back corner of 8?
It's partway through. It would be the extension of, it's a straight line that goes, you can see it starting from the High Street.
So it looks like
Right.
all those parking spaces really belong
To
to the other property.
To lot 58? Because that looks like that's the, is that the easement driveway for lot 58? Where it says 12 foot?
Where it says 12-foot.
Yeah, if I'm looking at High Street,
so.
I see 12 foot, 11 feet, and then a parked car in yellow. So-
I believe that's the easement. That's
So
correct.
that would be an easement. So in that easement, is that an easement? Because your property line looks like it stops where it says 11 and transects the beginning of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then makes a left and transects 11. Is that the property line?
I believe that's correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so with that being said, for tonight's discussion, parking space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cannot be discussed as parking availability for lot 59. Because if you sell 58, then all those parking spaces disappear and belong to the new owner. So that's why I'm trying to set this so that everybody understands how we're talking with this. It's great you own them both, but tomorrow you may not. So,
Understood, and that's very fair, sir. I would also suggest that 2 through 8 could be instead adjacent to the property and entirely within its lot and take up approximately the same space.
then you wouldn't be able to move.
Yeah.
Or you're gonna have to show us
How would you get in and out? I mean, you wouldn't,
That's,
it'd be tough to get out if you were number 8 and slid up. Seeing how you've only got, I tell you what, why don't we continue this to the next meeting?
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you why. Is so it'll give you time to go and reassess your parking and stuff like that, because if you asked us to make a determination tonight,
You wouldn't have the parking.
I would have to say you would not be as an extremely happy person. Okay? So why don't you do you a favor, and we're gonna help you to do that favor, and take this back and do some more work on that property so that you can come up with the correct spacing for your parking spaces and stuff like that, and then we could look at that again, okay? And I apologize, but, because I know that when a property owner owns more than one piece of property, they think they can move back and forth between the two when they're adjacent, and I wish that,
Unless they merge the lots.
unless you merge the lots in the two buildings and go through all of that, then we have to look at it as individual tax lots, okay?
Understood.
The other thing is if they're not quite parallel lines, but where you get the 12 feet, they go to the next building, that's where the cars were parked when I was up there. They were head in that area, so that's what's used as a parking lot.
I understand, but we cannot grant a variance, or is this a special exception? We can't grant a variance on the fact that they're parking in someone else's property.
Right.
Even though it's his property, we can't say that that meets the criteria of appropriate parking and stuff like that. So, and that's what we were trying to explain to him, to give him an opportunity to fix this.
Okay.
And show, so we have an opportunity to present something that might be workable.
Because if we had to deny it.
Saying it'll
it
be
would-
workable,
yeah.
I'm just saying might be workable,
Right.
okay? Because I don't think he totally understood all of that at this time,
Okay.
okay?
Good.
Does that sound fair to everybody, or
It does.
on the board?
I don't think we have a choice,
Well, we have a choice, we could have just, not listened and not compromised and not give him an opportunity, so I think this is a fair thing. So I'd like to make a motion that we continue this to the next meeting, to give the applicant an opportunity to address his application fully to the knowledge of what he is pertaining tonight to one lot. Okay?
I second that.
Do we got a second? All those in favor?
Chairman,
Oh, yes.
could I speak with this? I came up here tonight to deal with this. It's part of that issue with parking. I own that house on the corner of 141 and High Street.
Okay. Sure.
I've got the 12 feet of driveway, and he's got the 11 on the other side.
We haven't opened it up to a public hearing, though, but what do you want to do?
I got the abutters notice, and I live in Bedford.
You want to speak tonight?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. Have a seat.
Sure.
I'm going to open it up to the public, and I'm going to reopen it up to the public later. Since you're here, don't want to waste your time. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you, folks. I own the house at 141 Union Avenue, which is on the corner of Union Avenue and High Street. And
On the tax map, I'm
I
sorry to
don't have
interrupt
the
you.
PDF.
It's the one that's actually highlighted.
Yellow one.
The one you were talking about, the yellow one, yes.
So you're right on the corner of High Street and Union Ave.
So, for the record, that is Lot 60. Okay?
Your name, sir? I missed it.
My name is Jim McLeod. So anyways, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of things wrong with that property. Number one, I used to have a one-car garage next to the house. It burnt in like 2002. I came before you people to get a variance to build a porch instead of a deck. And you granted me that.
I remember that.
You
Yep.
remembered that, and I built a beautiful porch.
Did, yeah.
Now, on the side of that garage, there are 3 units in my house. There's only 2 parking spots for those 3 units. So that's an issue. I want to try to change that around so my vehicles have 3 parking spots facing the house, with the back ends coming out or whatever. But I've got up to the pin in the middle of that driveway, which leaves the applicant 11 feet on the other side, on the upper High Street side. Out of that 11 feet, he already moved his mailboxes down, or the person that owned it before him did. Now they're down to about 9 or 10 feet. Your average plow is 9 feet. So if I park my vehicles there, we couldn't even get a plow in. Now, I stopped there before coming over tonight. There were 7 vehicles in that parking lot, and it was jammed. You probably could have fit 1 or 2 more, just like you saw when you visited it. There's no way that that amount of cars can fit in there. And the second issue is to add 2 more apartments to that complex, which is going to add more vehicles. Kids have no place to play. They're playing in the driveway, which makes it dangerous because of all those people backing in and coming in and out. Emergency vehicles would never make it in there to put a fire out. I mean, it's just jammed right now, and there's no place for snow, and there will be 0 place for snow if you fill the rest of it up with vehicles. And part of the plan that I saw was Mr. Daniel had 1 parking spot right on the other side of the mailboxes. So if I park my 2 vehicles together, there's no way another vehicle could even get in to go park. So I don't think he really realizes where the property boundaries are there or what the impacts are. But kids have no place to play. There's toys all over the place. They're playing in the street. I don't have a remedy for him, but that is a bad plan to add 6 units to that, or 2 more units to the 4 that are there. Like you said, he can't combine those spaces, so I don't think it can be done. But that's not up to me.
Okay.
That's what I found.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you have a motion, and
Well,
what are you gonna do?
I'm going to do a motion, but, yes,
May I speak?
yes.
Thank you. Linda Dutile at 15 High Street. And I've lived at 15 High for probably about 40 years now. And the building that's being discussed tonight was shuttered back a few years ago. That was always something to look forward to, better than any soap opera I've ever seen. I can tell you the chaos that I see across the street on a daily basis. Vehicles are parked every which way. There is absolutely no rhyme or reason to the parking. Along the side of the house, back a few years ago, I believe a vehicle went down over a banking. Yes, thank you. And on trash night, Tuesday night when they start bringing out their trash, and then 3 days later, after Wednesday pickup, I have to say they're still there. Recycling bins there's been one out there now for probably 3 weeks, a red one. On a windy day, you know where that stuff flies. I have lived there. I take care of High Street. You know, I live across with Tony Mayhew, Earl Walker, the mayor and governor of High Street. And I go out there, and if there's trash, I pick it up, because that's part of, I taught my kids. It may not be, you didn't put it there, but somebody needs to pick it up. Every little bit helps. I've gone out there years ago when the place was just about being shuttered. Glass was broken on the side. I went out there to sweep it up. I have this kid yelling out the 2nd floor window, "Why are you doing that?" Why do you think I might be? Because I care. I don't see another 2 units benefiting that neighborhood at all. I really do not. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Anybody else like to speak for or against at the moment? There will be another opportunity next month, because I will never close to the public when I continue an item, so. 1 second, I'll be right back with you. Okay. Now, could the applicant please come forward? Yeah, just take that motion off the table for the moment. We're not gonna discuss that at the moment, so, I will bring that back up again, so, because I'm gonna revise that a little bit. Yes, sir.
So first off, thank you both for those comments. As I mentioned, I'm a little newer to all of this, and I'm trying to get a feel for the property. It's certainly the case that the parking lot at the moment is a little bit chaotic. The only points I'd like to make to those that were mentioned is first that the previous owner who actually did a fairly wonderful job, I think, in the last 8 months or so of taking out some of the previous tenants and replacing them with newer ones. Certainly the experience I've had with them thus far has been fairly positive. I do recognize that there is a bit of a trash problem on the property. I recently put 3 new recycling bins on the property that I hope will help alleviate it, and I've worked with our property manager to reinforce the message to the tenants. He's also set up a parking plan, which is intended to help alleviate some of the chaos there, and also has made specific reference to them about the trash and the parking area. It's certainly my intention to work with the community to try and find something that is beneficial for everybody, and certainly understanding the comments that are made, I'd like to try to work within those constraints and see if we can find a way of having something work.
Okay. What I would like to see is a parking plan and a utilizing, understanding that you have it has to pertain to that 11-foot entrance that you got, how you're gonna utilize that entrance at 11 foot to get in and park the cars that are necessary for that in a proper manner. And we're gonna need to know by scale how that's gonna function, okay? Would y'all provide him with the actual parking sizes that would be required so that he would know how?
I believe it's 9 foot by 19 foot, and that's.
He does have it indicated on his plot plan that it's 9 by 19 per parking spot. So we'll discuss it with the applicant so that we can.
Because I want to make sure that property 59 has the appropriate entrance to size that is required to make a proper entrance. Okay, so that we can make sure that the parking's in and out, and that would be separate from the 12-foot section, because that 12-foot entrance is utilized for property 58. So that can't be used in the same for the other property.
So for my own verification, this lot, this 59 with 4 units in it would need 6 parking spots right now, as it were.
Yes,
Not-
for the 4 units,
not-
it already needs 6 parking spaces. So for 2 more, that's gonna be another 3 parking spaces that would be required. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would have to, with mobility being able to be used, so, okay? So you understand what we're doing? Okay, now, do you want us to continue it to the next meeting? You think you can accomplish, because that's a lot of detailed work, so that's why I'm asking, you think you'll accomplish that by the next, when would he have to have that
Well, he
accomplished
could
by?
ask for an extension if he can't do
Yes.
it, right?
Yes.
So we could schedule it for the next meeting. If you can't make it, just say, you can contact them and request an extension.
Okay,
That's more than fair.
okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna, with that in mind of what we're looking for, And that's not gonna guarantee you're still gonna get it, that's just gonna get you to the next phase. You understand? Okay, I just wanna make that clear. All right. With that, I'm gonna make a motion to continue to the next meeting. Application 0033 for 145 Union Ave. Okay?
I'll second it.
And all those in favor?
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You can't back these out, there's not enough room. You see, it narrows down. Take a look at that. I've walked up on
Your office is right here.
Yeah.
Myself organized here real quick.
Peachy Street.
Okay, next application is 0034 SE 77 Mopeche Street. Applicant is requesting a special exception from Article 5, Section 235-26 and Attachment 2.3, Table 1 to create a boarding, rooming, lodging house. Would the applicant please come forward, introduce yourself for the record?
Good evening, everybody. My name is James Lombardi. I'm an attorney, and I'm representing Carlos Guzman in connection with this application, and Carlos is here with me tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening. This is an application, as you know, for a special exception to operate a single-family residence at 77 Opeachy Street for short-term rentals during the times of the year when Mr. Guzman and his family are not using it. That use is expressly permitted in the Residence General District as a boarding/rooming/lodging house, subject to the satisfaction of the conditions for special exceptions under the ordinance, which Mr. Guzman has addressed specifically in his application. We do want to let the board know that this is a fairly new issue, I think perhaps across the state, certainly in Laconia and other places. While we're here, Mr. Guzman is here in good faith to address the claim that the board says that he needs permission as a special exception. We do reserve the right to challenge the board's authority to require this or to prohibit short-term rentals if that becomes necessary, or in a way that either challenging the underlying authority of the board to do that, or in the way that it might enforce it by, for instance, revoking a permit based on complaints that have been filed where those complaints are groundless or don't have much validity to them at all. And I take those comments basically from the articles that I've read in the Laconia Daily Sun about these issues, and I think there were a couple back in one in September and one in November that were addressing these things and how the city might approach it. So again, Mr. Guzman is here in good faith to seek a special exception for the purposes to use his residence, to use this particular property for short-term rentals, as he has the right to. If that is not granted, we will look at all other options that he might have as a property owner in Laconia. Brief background, Mr. Guzman purchased this property in June of 2017. He has rented it to folks through Verbo, which is similar to Airbnb. As I understand it, that is a vacation rentals by owner. It's a website where prospective vacationers may book a stay at a property where the owner is not currently using it. Mr. Guzman does require the head of the household or a rental group to be at least 30 years old. He typically rents to tenants that have been reviewed by other landlords in the past and has already begun to build a book of repeat customers. The property is used in the same way as Mr. Guzman and his family could use it, as a seasonal residence where they enjoy the amenities, the lake, barbecue, other things the property offers. Before renters take occupancy, Mr. Guzman makes it clear to these folks that this property is in a residential neighborhood. He does lay down some ground rules for them, which he can address specifically. But he does insist that the neighbors be respected and the people that occupy his home act accordingly. We do understand that there was one complaint that's been filed with the city regarding the use of this property as a rental. The planning department has indicated that it was made orally by phone, but it doesn't have a record of when the complaint was specifically made or what specifically it was about, other than it was a complaint about noise and parking. We did check directly with the Laconia Police. They had no further information on that complaint. We're aware of no other complaints having been made with respect to the property since Mr. Guzman has owned it. He does have a very positive relationship with his neighbors, and to maintain that, he is committed to maintaining open lines of communication with them and has spoken directly with them about this. I don't know if the board wishes us to go down the qualifications or the standards that need to be met in connection with a special exception. Those have all been addressed directly in the application itself. The bottom line is that the underlying use will not change. It's going to continue to be used as a residence, whether by Mr. Guzman and his family or by renters that he vets. And so there will not be any excessive demand on the types of services that the city would be required to provide in connection with this type of a property, whether it's police protection, fire protection, water, sewer, those types of things. The only possible place where someone might try to undermine the application is under subpart F, which it says the requested use will not create hazards to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, nor be detrimental to the use or out of character, the use of or out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. Again, this property, the underlying use will not change at all. It is designed for and is permitted to be used as a residence, as a single-family residence in this zone. The street on which the property sits is a through street. There are 5 waterfront homes, a home on the corner, and a middle school. 2 of the 5 waterfront homes are seasonal. The rest are full-time residences. And so therefore, the requested use as a dwelling for either Mr. Guzman or his tenants will not create hazards to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, nor be detrimental to the use of or out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. Again, the only piece of evidence or possible evidence that could be considered in connection with this is the one complaint that apparently was filed with the city, and again, it was an oral complaint. And so to that extent, the underlying use will continue again, and it will contribute to the health, safety, and general welfare and won't detract from it. The proposed location is appropriate for the requested use. Again, it is a permitted use specifically under the ordinance as a single-family residence. And therefore, it will be consistent with the intent of the chapter of the ordinance itself. Certainly, Mr. Guzman is open to taking any questions the board might have. So thank you.
Any questions?
How often is it rented?
So typically, at least in the summertime, we try to do 8 weeks of rentals, and we try to leverage it myself, my wife, and my 2 kids in the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. And then sporadically throughout the winter, depending on inquiries or rentals. I've owned it for 2 years.
So during the summer, though, it's rented out on pretty short-term basis then, right?
It's rented, you have to rent it for 7 days. You have to rent it Saturday to Saturday. I vet every rental, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, anywhere on social media that I can vet them. I don't allow parties. I don't allow cookouts. I let them leverage my home. I take pride in my home.
So where do you live?
I live on 77 Peachy Street.
No, you don't, well, you rent it out, so where do you live when you're not there?
So my primary residence is Bedford, New Hampshire.
And so if someone has a party on the weekend and they're out on Saturday night, you're not gonna see them till Monday?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
You're not gonna be up on Sunday morning to address anything that happened Saturday night?
Of course, if I get a call from one of my neighbors saying that there's an issue, I address it right away. Of course I do.
Do you have any kind of contingency plan if there is activity at your place over on Old
Yeah,
Peachy
so
Street?
I have a maintenance guy, I have a property management guy, who's a local realtor in the area who helps me with combat anything that's issue. I've owned it for 2 years. I've never, I had one bad rental my first season. I addressed it right away. I rectified the situation. And I've actually moved away from doing weekend rentals because I found that it brings issues. When it's too short of term, it's usually a quick in and out. So I've gone into that long 7-day family-oriented rental. And I haven't had any issues since that time.
Your attorney said that he went to the police department and found out there were no official complaints lodged.
Mr. Guzman checked himself.
Right.
on that.
But I've
I
got
did not.
letters signed by 8 people that was turned into us,
Yeah.
all making complaints about the activities at your home.
Yeah, and I actually look forward to hearing those complaints because,
Oh, I'm sure
like
you
I
will.
said, I've thought that I have had a open line of communication with my neighbors, and never once have they brought any of these 8 complaints up. As a matter of fact, 2 doors down is Christine and Rick, and they're good friends as they travel to Italy, renting my property for a week this summer. Terry, who lives right next door to me, sent me an email saying, you know, if I know somebody that's interested, I'll let them know that you rent your home. I have always had, everybody has my number, everybody has my email. I'm part of the community. I want to be part of the community. I want this to be my lake home someday. I want it to be something that my family and I can grow with. And, you know, I'm extremely disheartened and upset that all of these issues came to light now. I've never, like I said, I've never once heard of a complaint from any of my neighbors. Have they addressed it with me personally? And they all have my phone number, every one of them.
You know, the problem I see is some of these people wrote long letters.
Right,
It takes
sure.
a long time to sit down and put your thoughts together.
Sure.
And come up with this letter.
Sure.
They're pretty upset.
Sure.
Mr. Mayhew, can I ask, when were those complaints submitted?
When?
Yes.
Well, we received these on January 18th. We got this one, was written 1/16. This one was written on January 17th, 2019, January 17th.
So those were all less than a week
This
ago?
one, 1/20, and January 22nd, so they're pretty,
All within the past
But
week,
some of
is that right?
I'd call out the 20 seconds as asking more clarification than being,
but they take the time to write the letter, and that's the important thing.
oh yeah.
Is it possible that we could get copies of those complaints?
You want, you can have mine if you want someone.
No.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions at the moment? There being none, y'all may have a seat.
Thank you.
I'd like to open it up to the public and ask if anybody from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. Please come forward at this time and introduce yourself for the record.
Really?
Hi, my name's Lindsay Allen. I've resided full-time at 68 Peachy Street for the last 13 years. I raise my 2 kids there, they go to school, and I work here in the city. I did put something in writing to you, so I am one of the people. But I did want to get up and speak also. And I'm glad that you brought up that others have put things in writing as well, and it's not just my complaint. I believe that the neighborhood should remain a residential neighborhood. A business of a rental company does not benefit the neighborhood. There are constantly issues with parking around the sharp corner. There was a police officer who made at least 4, if not 5 cars move from the corner on McGrath Street because of how dangerous the situation was. And I know it came from the applicant's home because he had to knock on the doors to find out who lived there. He made them all move, didn't ticket them because of how unsafe it was. We have issues with parking on O-Pee-Chee Street. So everybody parks, and then there's a big sharp corner. I don't know if everybody is familiar with it. So every time anybody rounds that corner, we're in the left-hand lane. Every single time. There's no way out of it if there's cars parked right there. So now we have cars lined up on McGrath Street, so we're in the left-hand lane trying to make that corner, and you can't see anybody either way. That is an issue I have. I personally don't feel like something like that, some type of a business like that, should be close to the middle school. And I have heard from several neighbors since the first time they had rentals about the problems with noise. I don't know why they haven't complained to him, maybe because they don't have his phone number and didn't feel like they should complain to him. I don't know. I don't have his phone number, or I didn't have his phone number, and I don't know if that's going to address the situation if things are come and already passed. So I am opposed to the applicant. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public wish to speak?
Good evening. I'm John Trimper. My wife, Terry, and I own the abutting house at 73 O-Pee-Chee. And we didn't get a chance to send a letter, but I've got 7 copies.
Okay.
It's 3 pages, right?
I have an extra one, John, if you need.
All right. Thank you, sir. And since my wife couldn't make it tonight, I thought maybe I could just read it kind of fast, because it does cover a lot of the
Please.
issues that are on the table. Dear members of the Laconia Zoning Board of Adjustment, we respectfully submit the following as background information and in opposition to the applicant's request for special exception. We are direct abutters to the applicant's property as owners of 73 O-Pee-Chee and have owned such property since March 2017. We purchased said property because of not only the beauty of Lake O-Pee-Chee and the deeded waterfront that we enjoy, but also given the serene, quiet family nature of the neighborhood. We have young children and our home is in very close proximity to the applicant's property with literally only slightly more than our driveway width separating the house. So maybe 10, 12 feet. Although we have never filed a formal complaint with the city of Laconia concerning the applicant's rental of the property, we have had occasions to complain directly to the applicant about various problems with his tenants. Specifically, those complaints have involved both noise and safety issues. In June 2017, we contacted the applicant to let him know that his tenants were recklessly operating a jet ski and endangering the lives of our young children who were merely trying to swim in front of our property. Prior to contacting the applicant, we had spoken several times to the tenants directly but had not received any positive response, and instead confronted their hostile assertion that they were able to use the machines as they chose. We were forced to keep our children out of the water. On another occasion, in July, we contacted the applicant about a matter of much lesser significance. I'll skip that one. In August 2017, we again contacted the applicant concerning disruptive, loud, and unruly behavior of his tenants. Specifically, tenants had an ongoing party at the subject house that included the use of beer funnels, loud music, extreme profanities, rude sexual gestures, among other things, on the deck of the subject house. The problem was so significant that we would not allow our children outside. The tenants' behavior began at daylight and continued through the night. We had politely spoken to the tenants about their conduct prior to contacting the applicant, but the tenants ignored our requests and continued their rather disgusting behavior. We watched these tenants go out on their boat and essentially break the transmission on their boat by making fast, abrupt turns in front of our property, forcing them to dangerously return on the boat and reverse to the applicant's dock. We believe that they were very intoxicated. Our young children heard and observed this same distasteful crew drinking from the applicant's deck, yelling chug, chug. And again, we decided we needed to keep our children inside. And by the way, our deck is 20 feet, you know, the back of our house over there, 25 maybe. We've had other examples of extremely loud, disruptive conduct and behavior late at night from some of applicants' other tenants since the above instances, but we have honestly avoided confrontations and opted to close windows and put fans on to mask the noise. We seek to be a good neighbor and be understanding. We note that there have been tenants at the applicant's home that have been respectful of the neighborhood. However, we recognize that it is impossible to screen out all bad tenants who have paid significant money to vacation on the lake and who may have zero interest in following any common rules of decency, consideration, and respect. We assert that granting of a variance would be contrary to the public interest and that it would significantly alter the character of the neighborhood. Loud and late night noise and bad behavior have not been observed at any of the surrounding homes, and to the best of our knowledge, all of the properties are owner-occupied. We also believe that the running of short-term rentals in the neighborhood will diminish the value of the surrounding properties, including ours. Should the variance be denied, the applicant will not face any unnecessary hardships, as he will still be able to use the property, as every neighbor does along Opeachy Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak for or against?
Good evening. My name is Wayne Cousino. My wife Doris and I reside as a neighbor to Carlos at 83 Opeachy Street. Our driveways are side by side, as say, and my contention is with this. I've known Carlos and his family, and they're great people, and the kids. The first year that they had the rentals, there was some instances, as pointed out here. However, I think since he's gone to VRBO, the Vacation Rentals by Owner, as indicated last year, the tenants are much different, more concerning. I've met several of the people that have rented the property. Most of them are family members. One such family from, they used to live up in Stewartstown. The mother still lives there. The daughter now is married and lives in the Carolinas, and they come up once a year, and their brother lives and works at St. Anselm's College, and they were there for the week, and you couldn't ask for nicer people. And another family from Westfield, Mass. Was up this summer, and they were the same way. Maybe I've interacted with the renters of this property more than other people have, I don't know. But I know I always, if somebody's there, I try to get to know them. Let them know that, you know, what kind of a neighborhood it is, what we expect of them, and that. But to tell you the truth, like I said, within the last year especially, there's been a big difference. I know there was, again, I know there was some problems in the beginning. I didn't call Carlos. I know Terry and John did. I figured the incidents were taken care of, and that's in the past. As far as the neighborhood goes, I think if we have the people that I've seen come up this last summer, it's not detrimental to the people. As far as parking in that area, for the most part, people park along there, and the people that have rented the property, Collis's property, generally park in the driveway. There might be they might have one car up in front of the house, all right? There's other vehicles that park there during the day, like the gentleman that's the maintenance person at the school parks in front of my house every day. And one of the teachers parks in front of Collis's house. And one of the maintenance guys parks in front of Collis's house. So that's all part of general city operation, as you want to call it that. But as far as I'm concerned, if the rentals are kept respectably what they're supposed to be doing, I don't think there's really a problem. I think one of the problems is the fact that nobody in the neighborhood realized what the law, so to speak, was as far as rentals were and who to complain to. I mean, if I was going to complain, I'd call Collis up. I wouldn't first, unless nothing was done, then I might go to the police. But I'm not going to call the police up first if I got his number, and I do have his number, right? So, as far as I'm concerned, it's not detrimental to my house. I mean, I live right next to it. And the only thing I do have a question on is, if this is granted, this, it's called, I noticed in the application, it wasn't called a variance, it's called a special exception. Excuse me. If they sold the house, do they the new owners have to come and reapply?
No.
Nope.
Or does it continue on?
It continues on.
Forever and ever and ever and ever.
All right.
Amen.
That, I have questions about it. I have concerns about it, right? Because you don't know who's gonna buy the house. I know who the owner is right now and what I can expect, all right? So, that's one of my concerns. And, I think the other thing I wrote in the letter was, what I noticed in the paper, in the Laconia Sun, the writing were calling out a variance. And I noticed this is a special exception, right?
Depends on which zone. It depends on the zone the property resides in.
Okay.
There are actually places in the city that this type of operation or business is permitted.
Okay.
Okay, and then there's places that it's only permitted by variance, and then there's places where it's permitted by a special exception.
Okay.
Okay, for this type of business.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Anybody else from the public wish to speak for or against this?
Hi, Rick Page at 69 Peachy Street. There's been a lot of great points that were mentioned tonight. And honestly, I've got several bulleted points that I wanted to talk about, but honestly, I have to say that, I think most of us really like Carlos. He's a good man and is doing his level best to bring the right kind of tenants week by week. I really believe that. My issue is, like what was just mentioned, if this is forever and ever, like, we have a sense who Carlos is. We have a sense the kind of business he's operating. Now, yeah, there's times, it's been a little loud. We're very tolerant neighbors. We don't want to call and complain. We're like, we don't want any problems. We all get along. It's a very close neighborhood. And I could address that and say, is it out of character? Yeah, probably is, because we all know each other, we feel safe with each other, we trust each other, and when it's a weekly exchange, we kind of lose that. All right, put all that aside. Again, going back to, we know Carlos and what he's trying to do. Trust in that. What happens next? Are we going to live with that? I don't, when you move to a neighborhood, you pick that neighborhood because of a feeling. this operation, to me, you lose that feeling. I like knowing who all my neighbors are all the time, not week by week. You know, if it was a rental, like if somebody decided to, you know, go to Florida for the winter even, you know, 4 or 5 months, man, it's a little longer to get to know somebody, but week by week, you know, I don't know. That's where my issue is. And like I said, not even so much with Carlos, but if, you know, a year from now, 2 years from now, he sells the place, who do we have? We might have somebody who cares 10% of what Carlos does, because he does care. I know he does. Okay? Yes, sir.
If you lived in another place in Laconia, let's say in the Weirs, and the place that's traditionally, instead of being a rather stable neighborhood,
Right.
is used to weekly rentals
Yep.
all the time, would you have the same complaint?
No, but I would choose not to live there.
Sure.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with the Weirs.
No, I know, no.
But that's a whole different district, you know.
But what it is, I think what I'm trying to get to here is where this is expected.
Right.
The type of the community that's
Right.
expected in.
Right.
You know.
Exactly.
That is the thing. There's a feeling in there's pockets of neighborhoods, and I know it's not just a Laconia problem. This is a nationwide problem. And we got to get a handle on how to approach this, you know, because it's just going to keep going. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. You got your money's worth.
One thing, special exception doesn't go away.
Hi, my name is Norma Sorgman, and I've lived on the corner of Belknap and Opeachy Street. I've lived there for 30-something years. And my big concern, and I've never met Mr. Wisman, happy to meet you this evening. But my big concern is that if this is granted, what would keep from, you know, does that mean that others in the neighborhood could decide to go for this kind of exception as well? And then we become the Wares, no longer this quaint, lovely neighborhood. And in truth, I know that neighborhoods change over time. I've seen it, living there for 30 years, but it's maintained this comfort level that we that live there enjoy. And as Rick said, we moved there because of what it has to offer us, which is a comfortable place to live where you get to know your neighbors and have all kinds of wonderful exchanges. So that's my concern, is that if one goes, is there a potential for many, there's always a potential for others to go, and the whole nature of the place changes. Yes.
Did you raise kids and put
Yes,
them
I
in the
did.
schools there?
Yes, absolutely.
That makes part of the community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak for or against this application?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Scott Knowles. I'm a local realtor for RE/MAX Bayside. Carlos is my client as well. I come more to speak in general terms of, I kind of, a little bit nervous that if we start outlining or saying no rentals in any of the neighborhoods except the Weirs, I'm not sure where else it may be allowed, it's certainly going to hurt the values of a lot of our homes and a lot of our neighborhoods.
What do you base that on?
I've been selling real estate for 15 years. The last 3 or 4 years, you've seen quite an increase in Laconia values, especially in waterfront homes and especially in water access homes.
So you're saying that based on your real estate findings, that because it's a rental, weekly rental, that it improves the
It helps the
values?
affordability of the home.
Oh, it helps the affordability of the home.
The buyer
It
can
doesn't
afford this
help
home.
improve the neighborhood. You're not saying that.
I'm not saying that, but what it does do is it brings people to Laconia who get to experience Laconia, get to go downtown and eat at local and buy a coffee at Wayfair, and then say, you know what, this is a nice little community. I think I'd like to buy a second home in this community. You know, if they stay in the Weirs, they might not think that this is such a, again, not to rag on the Weirs.
And we won't.
There's not many hotels, certainly in Laconia, that they can stay in. So I just, again, overall, it's just, I agree, something, we need to figure this out, let alone, civil liberties and being able to do what you want to do in your own home. But from a real estate perspective, that's where I have a concern, and I'd hate to see, I have lots of buyers that I work with who say, I could probably rent this out a couple weeks, and that'll help pay the taxes or, pay my utility bills for the year and make it more affordable for me. And in doing so, I can spend that extra $20,000 for the house where I may not if I couldn't. So I just wanted to talk about that. So thank you for your time. Yes, sir.
I have one question, and one of the other places that this is allowed is shorefront residential?
Correct.
So that's another one, just to know, shorefront residential. But that's not what this is in this community. Am I correct on that? Where's my
This is neighborhood
This is
general.
residential general.
Yeah.
RG? And so that would be some of the differences on it.
Okay,
When
if
you
you buy a
go,
house in a residential neighborhood, you expect it to be a
Residential.
residential neighborhood.
Okay,
But I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Hi, my name is Ed Bonez. I'm a resident here in Laconia. I would agree with Scott Knowles in what he's saying. I'm finding a lot of my buyers, I'm also a real estate agent, looking to buy a home here and retire in 4 or 5 or 6 years. So they are looking in residential neighborhoods for a property that they want, and they're planning to reside here. They're trying to get in now while they believe the prices are realistic, versus 5, 6 years from now. So these folks do want to rent these properties out. They are moving here. And we're not talking about someone who's buying a $100,000 house. We're talking about these people who are coming to town and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the majority of these properties. So when they're coming into your neighborhood, they might be dropping $1 million to buy a house. And if they want to rent it out throughout the summer to pay for it until they get here, I think it's a mistake to restrict them. I understand when I look at O-Pee-Chee, I understand they're parking on that corner, but you know what? I know there's an empty school right there all summer long, right? So people could park there. There's places to make this work. And I think it's important that we put an effort in. Our master plan is to, we're trying to draw people here and grow this city and make it a better city, but we're just going to restrict everything everybody does. I think that's the mistake. I think we allow it in the Weirs. Folks coming to the Weirs are not looking at Laconia as this is where I'm going to buy. People coming to Laconia and spending time in this area are looking at this place and saying, this is a great place to buy. I think it's important that we take that into account, and I'd ask that you approve Mr. Guzman's application today. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
What was it?
Let the record indicate no one else from the public wishes to speak for or against this application. I'll bring it back to the board.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, can we?
Yeah, you're going to get a chance.
I don't have anything to say right now.
Any closing comments?
Yes.
Please.
I'll let Carlos speak for himself on some of the issues that were raised. And first of all, from my perspective, and I think Carlos probably shares it, and I think we all do, I don't diminish anything that was said earlier. If I own a home, I want to make sure that it's in a neighborhood that I can appreciate and live in and value and continue to live there without feeling like I am being pushed out. As far as, I will say, it is a little bit disappointing that none of these complaints were aired when the issues actually arose. And I don't want that to sound like I'm attacking these folks for bringing them up now, but this is the first that either Carlos or I have heard of these, and these were all made within the last week. But to address the specific issues that they raised, there was one woman talked specifically about the traffic problems. I think that the traffic problems are inherent, or the parking issues are inherent to that particular neighborhood. There's nothing that Mr. Guzman could do or other folks could do there. with respect to who's occupying the house that would change that. As far as the noise and profanity is concerned, I couldn't agree more that it's sort of a nature of the beast. It is what the world has become. Can things be done to address those things? Absolutely, and I think that Carlos would tell you that he has. As a matter of fact, Mr. Cousineau's letter said it specifically that since Carlos has been offering the property through Verbo with the stipulation that applicants be head of household and household or rental group to be at least 30 years old, the people renting the property have been very courteous and thoughtful. They do acknowledge that there were some incidents involving unruly behavior prior to that. Again, I'll let Carlos address that issue himself. Again, you cannot legislate civility, but you can try to control it. You can't, by the way, control who your neighbors are. So if you move into a neighborhood that you expect is going to maintain some semblance of courtesy and civility, there's no telling who's going to move in next to you. I'm not excusing the people that have rented from Carlos early on and didn't abide by any normal modes of civility and courtesy. But we all face those same issues too. So to penalize someone who's looking to utilize the property and to stay there long term and to use it ultimately as retirement home, you know, that doesn't seem right to me. And it seems like you're trying to use this particular rule or this particular standard to keep him from using this when he could, any one of us could be subject to some person moving in next door to us that we don't like at all. And there are a lot of those folks around, I think. As far as the special exception running with the land, the point was made, and that is true. However, anybody that comes into this property to use it, and I don't think that Mr. Guzman will be selling this anytime soon, because that's not his intent. Again, he can address that. But they would be subject to the same conditions that the board puts on it if they decide to approve it with conditions. It's not as if they could just come in, operate short-term rentals without any standards that they need to meet. They would be subject to the same rules. And I'll let Carlos make any comments he wishes to.
So I know when we first started, you said I couldn't address them.
You'll address everything to the board, that's
Okay,
correct.
so I do want to thank them for taking the time to come out, and I value their opinion and their feedback. And so, as John stated, you know, when I first started, I didn't really understand the whole game, didn't understand how this rental piece worked and how to vet people. So I listed it on VRBO, I listed it on Airbnb, and yes, he's 100% correct. They called me on 2 instances, and both of those instances, I addressed them. I stopped renting to people under the age of 30, which were the people that were funneling beers, and I made it so that it was family-oriented, so that I knew if there's kids in the home, the adults are going to act like adults, and it's a family home. A year later, the 8 rentals that I had this summer, I did not get a single complaint or a single phone call. I value the neighborhood. I understand where they're coming from, and I do not minimize their concerns. But I do want the board to know that I'm not running a business. I'm not running a rental business, as they called it. It's a home. And I feel I try to provide a home away from home for people that can't maybe buy a house or that can't stay in a $300 a night single hotel room with their kids. And I value every single rental that comes in there, and you can go check it out online yourself. I value every single one of those people, and I give them a place that they can call home for the week. And the one thing I ask them is to be courteous of my neighbors and to respect the neighborhood. And I do not minimize that they live there full time, because I understand that. John is, you know, he's half the year there. He's there in the summertime with his family and his kids, and I try to be a part of the community when I'm there and interact with the community and be part of the community. As far as this special exception going with the property, I have no issues having some type of contingency where when I sell the property, it's done. you did a contingency like that. So I have no issue saying that when I sell a property, it needs to come back before the board. I overheard that happened with the women's rooming home. I have no issues if the property changes hands, it goes with me. So I don't plan on selling the home. It's my family's home.
Okay. Is that it? Is that it?
That's it. I don't have anything further.
Question?
Sure.
How many weeks a year do you rent a place?
8 in the summer, and then if I can get like 3 or 4 more in September, October, I will. Depends. It depends every year.
Pond hockey.
No pond hockey. Stay away from them. Stay away from them. No. I told you, I learned my lesson.
Yeah,
after the
yeah, I
first year. I say it wholeheartedly. I learned my lesson. I don't do Airbnb. I specifically target families.
Are you in the real estate business in Bedford?
I'm not. I'm not. Like I said, I bought this home to be my family's home. And renting it that time affords my young family the ability to use it and leverage it.
Any other questions? That's it?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna close it to the public and bring it to the board for discussion.
I guess I'll jump in. I see.
1 foot or 2?
2.
Okay.
You recognize that the community moves on. And you recognize that what people are used to may or may not be that way forever. Whatever forever is, is forever. 15 years, 25 years, 50 years. People grow their families, they move, and then the neighborhood changes. In our community, and this is just, when you look at these rather tight-knit neighborhoods that do change, either because the people have passed away, people don't live there anymore, they moved out because there's not enough money at the jobs, whatever, you're going to, we didn't have so much of this short-term rental as we did before, or the availability of it. I think technology is driving, or the availability of these places. I still think, in the end, once you start having turnover, weekly or whatever like that, it changes the flavor of the neighborhood. If it's something that the neighborhood accepts. And once again, there are places in the city that are part of the zoning that this is open to. I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm still don't have a positive feel, but I do know in a little community like that, where everything's right on the side, it changes it. Most of the people that lived here before had kids in the system. They're committed to the community because they're living and growing families here.
Okay.
2 points. The reason Mr. Guzman is here tonight is because somebody made a complaint. Otherwise, he wouldn't be here, because those are the only ones that are coming before this board. So to say that, everything is pristine over on O-Pee-Chee Street, I don't think is quite true. There's a reason he's here. Secondly, when somebody mentioned the city master plan, when the last master plan was drawn up, this concept didn't exist. So we can't look back on the master plan and see if that's what they were looking to go toward or not. The other thing is, the way it was outlined tonight, the future of Laconia is going to be retired people and transits. I don't see that there's room for anything else, because they said themselves that they're marketing these homes to people who are going to retire in 4 or 5 years. Well, a vibrant community needs young people to come in and live in the city. Is that what our next master plan is going to show, that we want people who are in semi-retirement to come in and rent their houses out on a part-time basis to whoever wants to come along? I don't know if I see that as Laconia's future. At least I don't think I want to see it as Laconia's future. We have no guidance from the state or from anybody as to how we should be handling these short-term rentals. We're on the front lines. We have to do it ourselves. And we have to take a stand.
I don't think the state, I think the state doesn't have to give us guidance on this.
No.
I feel the state has done their part. We have zoning that this addresses all the issues that are before us between short-term rentals and long-term rentals and businesses. Our zoning is set up to do that. So the state to say this particular business should have special guidance is not their preview. That's each individual town and how they want to set up their town and within the zoning that is set up here, okay? So the state doesn't even need to be involved. It's already been approved through, I understand. Neighborhoods, people when they move here, to go along with what you say, I feel, are when they move into a traditional neighborhood, that is what they're buying into, not to have a hotel short-term rental units next to you next door. So I'm not sure if that's part of the makeup of a neighborhood. That's the makeup of a resort area, okay? And your normal neighborhoods, I don't think are resort areas. A lot of people say Laconia is a resort. Yeah, a portion of Laconia is a resort, and a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is neighborhoods. And that's what people buy in, so they can grow their kids and move into that safe, close-knit area, okay? I live in the South End. We used to do, everybody on the whole area did Christmas and stuff, the holidays, and did their yards and stuff, you know, and closed off a street and had that. That was a neighborhood, okay, where everybody knew everybody, okay? To me, that's my impression, okay?
You know, these are really difficult decisions, but the fact of the matter is it's in a residential neighborhood, and this is a new thing that's been thrown at us, and we have very little to work with. But I understand the people that live there, and you know, giving permission to this house, and this guy promises he's going to do the right thing, but then the next house does it, and they don't do the right thing, and then it mushrooms and it mushrooms and it mushrooms, especially when you're on a lake, especially a nice one like Lake Opeechee. I happen to live on Lake Opeechee. And the other thing too is that we've had several of these cases come before us and we've denied them. And for obvious reasons, and you know, for reasons that we all believed in. And it's important that we stay consistent. There's no difference between this property and the one you denied last month. You know, I think if a property has no direct abutters, if there's no impact on the neighborhood, it's a different situation. But when you live in a tight little neighborhood like this, and it does have an impact on the neighborhood, I feel strongly that it does. And I wouldn't want the house next to me turning over every week and not knowing what's going on. Because that's not what I bought into when I bought a house. So I have a hard time with this. I can't see personally approving this special exception.
I agree with 90% of what you said. The 10% I don't agree with is because of it was denied in the past, that it should always be denied. Each property.
No, I said that, and we should look at each other, but the city has said to us, you need to be consistent in regulating these right now until something else comes up. Maybe there will be a lawsuit, and maybe we will be challenged. But right now, you know, we can't pick and choose what we want to, sort of, totally what we want to do. I mean, it's a bigger issue, these Airbnbs, and everything's done over the internet. You don't know who's coming in, and just, if Mr. Guzman, I'm sure he's respectful, and he you know, vets his renters, but you can't guarantee that. And I don't know, it's a tough one, but I just can't.
Short-term rentals are good. They bring a lot of money. People come and spend money, but they go a little wild.
Mhm.
Until we have a set of rules that could limit rentals in a residential neighborhood, because right now, you can rent that house out 15 times a year, have 15 different families in there. Until we have some set of rules where you could limit the rentals in a residential neighborhood, a set of rules that controls.
Or if the city changes the zoning, you know, but that's not up to us.
But I
can.
don't get this for the fact that the rules are the rules. We have the rules here. Everybody's saying we don't have rules. We have rules. Everybody's
The
looking
rules say
for.
it's not allowed right now.
The rules are how the zoning is set up, and it says everything we need to know and make a judgment by. So it either fits into this criteria or it doesn't. We don't need guidance from a state to interpret how these A through H is interpreted. Anything that goes under a special exception has the same criteria. So we have all the guidance we need. We take the evidence that is presented to us from the applicant, we take the discussion, we take input from the abutters and people of concern, and we take all that and we weigh that against what's between A through H. And that's the rules that we govern by, okay? And so.
I understand.
To give to say the state hasn't gave us guidance, the state doesn't need any guidance because it falls under a special exception, okay? And it's already been determined that it's a, whatever the special exception is.
Commercial business in a residential area.
So it's all set up there. It's there. There's nothing else to look at other than the applicant giving us their evidence of how they do meet the A through H. And then we take the input and then we make our determination. Does it in fact meet A through H and what we feel?
I don't believe it does, because as a couple of people tonight wrote, John Kemper and Miss Allen, very good points they brought up, that it will alter the character of the neighborhood, and it's not an unnecessary hardship to deny the application. And once we do, if we so approved it, it would be forever and ever. So therefore, I don't see how we can approve it.
Well, a hardship is only part of a variance. So that hardship part is not in question on this, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever.
However, if this was happening in a different zone.
That's
would be
correct.
similar, that was subject to a variance, there would be no hardship, because there's no hardship involved.
And that
But-
would be determined on that piece of property, yes.
And I don't want to muddy the waters here, but to have a discussion on this. These short-term rentals aren't going away. And I can see certain pieces of property as I sit and look at Laconia, different neighborhoods, as it were. Even if there are a few neighborhoods where you wouldn't impact your neighbors. Let's say you live somewhere and you didn't have someone right on top of you.
Right.
And you were an RR1 even. But if there's no one around you and you can not bump your elbows on anybody and no one's going hoot and holler, then you're not changing the neighborhood.
Right.
But when what we've come across tonight is everything is getting denser and denser and denser. And so once your density is so much, Peachy Street can't get any tighter, you know, due to our current zoning. But once you add the flux of constant turnover, then you lose the sense of community, I think, in those neighborhoods that are that tight.
And that's why each property is done on its own and justified through this. In this case, an RR1 is looking for, it would be a variance, so they would have to meet the criteria of the variance. In this case here, it's an RG, so they're having to meet the special exception. It has different criteria and stuff that it has to meet. So that's where all the rules and regulations between the uses, categories, and the variances and the special exception. So,
I don't think I saw anything in some of these presentations that even addressed the issues outlined in our book. We were told by several real estate people that it improves the value of the house. Well, you know, we're not in the business of making real estate people rich, I don't think. I think we're in the business of making sure that the laws as they're promulgated, as you said in Laconia, in that book, are followed. And O-Pee-Chee Street is probably one of the most residential streets in the entire city of Laconia. I can't see changing that characteristic.
okay. Anything else? Like to entertain a motion?
Are you, I didn't get a sense which way you're going.
Me? I don't think the location is appropriate for the requested use. It's a neighborhood of families, and families, when they move in, expect to have a family
So it sounds
environment.
like we're in unanimous agreement that this is going to be a denial. Okay. So
It
you're-
appears that way.
So you're good at this?
Okay, I'll make a motion to deny. I'm gonna go through the criteria real quick. A, the use requested is specifically authorized in this chapter. B, the request will not create undue traffic congestion. In this case, I'm gonna change that. The request will create undue traffic congestion and unduly impair pedestrian safety, as this could be utilized 52 weeks a year, and that it's next to a school in a close, compact area where the streets are not wide and parking is at a premium. The requested use will not overload any of the public water, drainage, or sewer system or any other municipal system, nor will there be any specific increase in stormwater runoff or property. The requested use, is not created, has not created excessive demand for municipal police, fire protection, schools, and solid waste disposal. Any special provision of the use, there are no special provisions of the chapter. The requested use the requested use will not create hazards to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, but it will be detrimental to the use of and/or out of the character of the adjacent neighborhood. Okay, so it is detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. The proposed location is not appropriate for the requested use. The requested use is not consistent with the spirit and intent of this chapter and the master plan. You have a motion?
A second.
You have a second.
Who's gonna, I got it both at the same time.
Pick one.
We'll go with Michael.
All right, leg wrestling.
Discussion of the motion? There being none, all those in favor of the motion? Aye. Okay. Sorry, the motion carries. And as I said before, at the beginning of the meeting, 111 Church Street variance was moved. I presume they're gonna tell us when they want back on it.
He said next month that he would be ready.
Okay.
Does that
Other
change- does that
business?
change the order? Does that put him
No,
third?
he'll still be at the, well, he'd still be,
One's
he'll be
continued.
third?
One's continued and,
Okay. Well, two we continued, didn't we continue?
yeah, two of them's continued, that's
They
a
would be still
different.
in the chronological order of the application, so they would still.
Right, okay, thanks.
Okay, generally, in January, we have the elections. It was not put on the agenda, so it wasn't publicized as far as board member elections and stuff. So we request that you put it on for the February meeting. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure, gives Mike time to campaign.
Stop. Just stop.
With all the women running, you'll fit right in.
Any other business before the board?
unless the board has any other questions?
No, I don't.
Oh, I had one thought. What are the chances of us meeting at 6:30 instead of 7 o'clock?
Or even 6.
If the board so chooses to amend the time of their hours, they can do so.
It's just that the meetings have been going so late, and it's hard to get through everything on the agendas. I don't know,
Let's give it a try.
it'd be great.
So if the board just
I
wants to.
get off a little earlier now,
Oh,
so
good. All right,
I-
how does everybody feel about 6:30?
6:30 or 6? it
It's a
doesn't
little
bother me.
tougher for me, but I have to leave work early to get here at 7, but I'm an alternate, so don't change.
I know that
The
Ori-
planning
I
board
know
meets at
that Ori wants
6:30,
you here.
and
Yeah.
we get out earlier because of that, so
It's just, we're all getting older, and it's just harder to stay
6:30,
up past
my
10
wife said
o'clock.
tonight, why don't you meet at 6:30?
She
She did, you know?
Well, let's try it for next month and see.
Do we have to notify the public, or just a monthly
we're gonna
notification?
take care of that.
We'll take care of
and-
that when we notice the meetings, but if the board wants to make some sort of a vote so that we have a record of the majority of the board showing that they wanted to change the time of the meetings.
So I make a, I make
Do
a-
we want to change it in the rules or just,
In the rules, it's left up to, it says the majority of the board.
Right, we said it, so we'll set it by somebody making a motion.
I say we make a motion to, test meeting earlier at 6:30 for our next meeting.
I'll second it.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the next meeting's at 6:30.
Need a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Vote.
Yeah.
Did better than last month.
Oh, jeez.